Good. Hi. Hello. Hello. Good evening. Good afternoon. Good morning. Or good night. I do not know where you are dialing in from, but I do hope it's from all over the world. Just as we had over the last few days participants from all over the world here at the ETH Global and Zora hackathon, Metabolism hackathon. My name is Michail. Based in Berlin. I am part of the Zora team and being also one of the co-organizers of the hackathon. And the last few days have been incredibly exciting for us. I'm really not exaggerating. I really mean it, that the things that have been happening over the last few days were absolutely unbelievable. And I want any of you who might have participated as a builder, as a designer, as an artist, or just as an audience member, to thank you for your time, for your work, for your giga brain, galaxy brain even ideas, and all the beautiful things that you have built. And I'm quite excited also to see what the jury has picked from, I think, nearly 100 submissions that we got on Sunday. For the hackathon. The jury was deliberating yesterday. I've heard it was a very thorough and tough process. They were fighting over the greatest ideas, and the prizes will be announced tomorrow. So I hope that you, of all people, and your team have won. So we have also today a wonderful program for you, a digital summit that will explore a few ideas that I think, and all of us think, especially, here at Zora, we think are very worth and important to pay attention to when we think about Web3 as an ecosystem, when we think about Web3 as a social space, when we think about Web3 as a technological space, or as I like to call it, as a techno-social space, which combines all these wonderful things into one ever-growing, wonderful, rhizomatic network of ideas, technologies, communities, and all the wonderful people embedded within. And when we talk about, Web3, very often, and especially also within the context of a hackathon, very often focus on the technology. So we focus on the code, we focus on the solutions, and very often on very utilitarian, like somewhat technocratic aspects of these technologies. But ultimately, these technologies are way more. They do manifest also social political realities. They are not just code, within stories are embedded, within that whole identities are embedded, amplified, and hopefully also empowered. And some of these things we wanted to explore now that you've had all the workshops, you had all the intros, you had all the technological deep dives, you came out with more wisdom than ever about what it is that you're trying to build. But today we will dive into the more social aspects of it. Not just, we'll also have a couple of technological things. Let me have a look. By the way, I do this for the very first time, so if this is a little bit rough around the edges, for example, this slide should have been shown already a few minutes ago, but here is me 2 years ago. And by the way, Opium Hum, that's like how you find me on all the social media channels. Opium Hum is, by the way, my DJ name. So if you ever go into a club, you see Opium Hum, that's me. So let's go to today's schedule. So what are we actually, exploring today if we talk about, all of these ideas that I kind of try to introduce to you? So one of the things that we really would like to pay attention to is DAOs. So the idea of a DAO has kind of changed over the last 18 months to 2 years, which used to be really technocratic, kind of fully on-chain tools of governance, those tokenomics, has also a little bit changed into a cultural signifier of sorts. So Web3 native communities that want to signal that they are using Web3 technologies, they call themselves often a DAO, even though sometimes the technological aspect of a DAO are not quite there yet or might not be the priority. But nonetheless, it's a really important category. And one thing that we've seen is a lot of the projects that we've seen over the last 18 months are cooperatives. They are vehicles for co-production. And this is something we would want to dive into with a couple of participants that are really native to Web3, but also come from the culture industries, and in particular, Andrea Magdalena from She Said So, which is a group of women and femme and queer people in the media and art industries. And what I'm particularly excited about, Elijah, who is an absolute legend of UK grime and bass music and the music industry, heavyweight in UK. And he will be joining us as well, on top of Sirsu, who all of you probably know, and Izzy from Refraction DAO. And after that, we are going to talk a little bit about how these technologies, Web3 technologies in particular, can be used for agency, how to manifest agency, what agency really means, especially within the context of politicized bodies. So when we talk about, building technology that contains equity, the question is, what kind of equity and for whom? And I do think that in particular, trans and queer communities that very often are not at the center of when such technologies are built have a unique opportunity using these technologies for not only empowerment, but also for building very, very resilient ecosystems. And this is going to be a panel that is co-presented by our friends from Mutual Love, a wonderful group of people that you should most certainly follow. Like everyone on these panels, please, I find them all incredibly inspiring, and so will you. Follow them, and a whole new world will open for you. A whole idea space. Let's see. Oh yes, Hamvan and Dorpel, legendary. Like, this is an artist who was making NFTs because NFTs, before NFTs were even invented. That is how long he's been doing Web3 and blockchain-based art. One of the very first artists to ever do an artwork on chain, and he will deep dive into his creative process. And wrapping things quickly up, we also will look into the emerging ecosystems of Web3 music. So Web3 music is not just minting songs as one-on-one NFTs, but there are already whole economies and ecologies of Web3 native ecosystems emerging, from on-chain digital audio workstations down to what does that actually mean, to bring music on chain. And one aspect that scholars and scientists and also builders have been arguing about a lot is metadata standards. And even if it sounds boring to some of you, it's incredibly important because it enables so much. And then something that I'm particularly excited about is Imane Bello will join us from France. She is a lawyer that is particularly focused on AI and innovation law. And given the fact that the last few weeks were all dominated by conversations around artificial intelligence, whether it's art, whether it's not art, she will deep dive with us into the ethical implications of these new emerging technologies, and also the economies that will result from it. So this is what we have for now. I'm gonna kick it off with the first panel. Very glad that is hosted by one of my absolutely most favorite people in Web3, Jose. Okay, Jose on Twitter, and he's joined by Andrea Magdalena from She Said So, Izzy Ocampo from Refraction DAO, Amir, aka Sirsu, from Black Hand, and the man like Elijah. I think that's about it. Let me just talk to the production, whether we are ready to go live. This is a very professional broadcast, by the way, so we have people in my ear. What's all attendees present? Is the host present? Are we okay to go live? We are good to go. So please, friends, enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks for that setup, Michail. Excited to have this conversation with everyone here on culture, community, and capital. I just want to kick it off by thanking everyone who's here today and everyone who's watching. First thing, just to set things up, I'd love for everyone to introduce themselves, what organization they're here representing, then answer the question that I think we're really here to talk about, which is, do you think DAOs are overrated or underrated? And I'm going to throw it to Andrea first.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Michail, for the invitation. I'm really in amazing company right here. Some friends I know, some friends I'm about to make. So yeah, great to be here overall. So I am originally from Romania, and I'm the founder of She Said So, a global community of women, gender minorities, and allies in the music industry that's been around since 2014. And right now we're about 15,000 people, 15,000 members distributed across 20 global chapters, and we still operate in a Web2 way. But definitely exploring what our future looks like in the Web3 space, given the fact that we finally have all the tools that we need to properly operate as a community, as a collaborative community. So excited to chat more about that.
Andrea, DAOs, overrated or underrated? You have to answer.
It's a double-edged sword. Underrated. I would say underrated.
Cool. I'm gonna throw it to Sirsu next.
How you guys doing? I'm Sirsu. I'm a designer, anthropologist. I think a lot about agency and what we can do to create unique experiences for communities. I think as a designer, like our responsibility is to be sort of like a shepherd that has a unique set of tools, but also we are kind of a teacher and enabling other people to take those same tools and build things for themselves. But DAOs, I was trying to find a great segue within that and the two things, but I couldn't. But I feel like DAOs are, I think contextually, DAOs are underrated, but I think the way most people look at or interpret a DAO, I think is incredibly overrated. Like there's a lot of people that make DAOs for the sake of DAOs because of the word or the acronym, I suppose, and the fact that it's like a term that can be used to capture interest or, at least when the bull market was going on, like, a lot of VC money without actually really seeing the level of depth that cooperatives, mutual aid funds, and a bunch of other like preceding like ways of gathering and galvanizing community and organizing for funds or for actions or for the combination of the two. They sort of disrespected the fact that we have this long history of self-organizing. And so like we're saying, oh, DAOs are the future. And so I think it was overrated in that context because it really downplayed a lot of the hard work that many of our preceding people have put together.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Izzy?
Well, thank you. I'm Izzy. I'm a musician, music educator, and I'm on the curatorial team at Refraction. I'm also the curatorial grants or creative grants lead at Refraction. Underrated or overrated? I have to agree with all of the points Sirsu brought up. I think underrated as a coordination tool, overrated in the sense that like a lot of the history around co-ops, squats, and collectives kind of gets like erased, the Web 2 organizing that's happened. But overall underrated. Yeah.
Cool. And last but not least, Elijah.
Hi, I'm Elijah. I'm from East London. I guess like my background's in DJing, writing, and my day job is like as an artist manager. Kind of spend a lot of time in clubs, and yeah, I've got to meet people from all around the world. I guess DAOs for me are like underrated. It kind of a lot of communities that I come from are not engaging with them yet, and I'm excited to see what happens when people bring some of the communities that they have offline, online, and kind of broadly connect with other people doing similar things globally. I think the internet has done that to a degree, but giving people a home away from socials would be like the stronger we can get that, the better.
Cool. So the first question I have here that I want to start off with, Andrea, is, community in Web3 often gets treated like a commodity, right? And She Said So has global chapters and membership in the tens of thousands. So I'm curious, how do you define community and why was it important for you specifically to cultivate one?
That's a great way to start off because I was thinking about it the other day, I'm going to go way back to my university days because I always felt that I went to university and wasted my time there. I studied media and communications, a degree that doesn't really take you too far. But I then remember that my final dissertation was actually on the concept of collaborative work and the power of communities. At the time, TED was just kind of like becoming this big platform where you can, learn really cool stuff that you wouldn't be able to get in university or, traditional education. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like literally just generated by the people, right? For the people. This is a really interesting concept. So that's where I originally got inspired by to create She Said So. Then I was mostly spending a lot of time in tech. I was pursuing a career in tech, and somehow I ended up with Mixcloud, a music tech startup at the time. I was employee number 5. I was really close to the founders and started diving deeper into the music industry. Which obviously is a very community, relationship-based kind of environment, and a very collaborative one as well. There's a village behind each artist, behind each release. But obviously, I noticed that there were some things that were wrong with it in terms of inclusion and representation. So I decided to do something about it, inspired by a tech community called Ada's List that I was a part of at the time, because I noticed that tech was talking about this thing called diversity, but the music business was no, that's not something we care about as long as it doesn't drive profit sharing up. So I was always inspired by tech tools, basically, and I created this community inside of a Google group. It still exists inside of a Google group, and multiple other platforms in terms of our local chapters around the world. When I first created it, there was nothing like it apart from maybe one US organization that was a nonprofit, and it was a bit clunky and old and wasn't really relevant anymore. So we came in. I was living in London at the time, so She Said So still has a huge presence in the UK and Europe. I lived in London for 7 years, and that's where the community grew really fast. But then obviously the music industry is a global environment, is a global ecosystem. The word spread even further. And then I started having all these people reaching out, oh, hey, I really believe in what you're doing. I really love the ethos. Men didn't feel aggravated by it. They felt included in this, cis men. They felt included in this movement. They felt like, oh, okay, we're trying to, fix things together. And that was something that was very important for me to communicate from the get-go, that we're here to create alliances and partnerships and, collaborations between all genders, really. But first, we need us women to get together as a group and sense check each other, make sure we're not crazy. This is actually something that all women are experiencing, help each other out, create a bigger voice, and then, show the world that, hey, we need to be listened to, just hear us out. And as the community grew beyond the word of mouth level over the next, 3 years or so, we didn't have a website. We didn't have a brand identity, social media. It was literally just that Google group. Obviously, as we scaled and all these local chapters popped up with their own sort of platforms, it became more and more difficult to maintain this sort of consistent ethos and the way in which we manifested that ethos. I think it's still there. If people hear about She Said So through conversations, I think that sort of those values are still carried there. But in terms of operations, how we manifest, how we operate together to collaborate on, curating playlists and curating events and all of that, it's a mess, I tell you. It's hugely difficult. And that's why, I'm at this place where I'm exploring Web3 solutions, because there's nothing in Web2 that is able to help us out, And so for me, to go back to your original question, community means people coming together with shared interests and shared commitment. Because at the beginning, there was a lot of shared interests and, people asking for things. And it was important for us to introduce this community rule that you first have to give something before you ask for something, and that you maintain your commitment to the community as much as you take from it. How you track that and how you manage that and ensure that it's the case and you reward participation, the way we've done that so far has been very analog and very imperfect. So I'm excited to explore these new tools available to us.
Sirsu, you touched on this, and I think Elijah did as well. So for folks like Andrea and the communities that Elijah mentioned that are sort of like not yet tapped in or just curious or just getting started, you've been around the block a bit. I'm curious if you could speak to the ways in which you've seen organic or more naturally formed communities kind of falter as they step into Web3, and the ways in which that kind of Web3 systems can sometimes trip you up or cause things to kind of go awry because there's edges that are difficult to understand if you're not kind of hip to what's going on.
Oh man, that's a great question. Yeah, so I think the one thing that a lot of folks, one of the first things that trips people up is that, and this is just not just like Web3 and DAOs, but this is just, I think, like the nature of crypto in general, is that it's not a passive place. Like this requires a lot of real, like active participation a lot of the time. It should still be healthy though. It's not like you need to spend every waking hour doing this, but because things start with you and like the aspect of the permissionless like models that we're all kind of dealing with, everything's opt-in, right? Like, or more so, I guess the better way to say is it's like everything asks you if it's okay to do something. Like, so without your wallet or without your key or like the means of you like engaging with this space, nothing happens with you in it, right? So you have to, so you're almost in a way like at the center of your own universe or gravity as it relates to Web3. So is everyone else. And so like, how do you take like something that is so I guess centered around your individual agency and pair it up with other people's ideas of agency to create something larger than yourself? And it requires all of you to be really, really dedicated to the cause of getting over the hump, right? Because nothing in this space right now is very easy or immediate, except for the gratification of you send something to a wallet, you automatically receive it, right? So it's real good at hitting that dopamine on that aspect of it, but everything else still requires human work, which is often the hardest thing to do, and you can't hack it. But if you have shared and aligned incentives to say, hey, let us all use these like tools, this ecosystem, this environment, because we see how like after we've laid the groundwork that it can start to flourish in ways that we couldn't have had like dreamed of before, then that's what really catalyzes that type of like really unique growth that you see in certain communities. For example, like FWB, right? Like it started as like a small group of people just kind of sharing and like keeping in touch with each other in Discord. And it ended up turning into, let's start inviting really cool and amazing, like dope people that are curious about this space and are willing to try it and see how it organically grows into something larger. And now it's like one of like the best like socially engineered spaces within Web3. But I think the first thing that trips people up is not really understanding that it's more than empowerment in this space. It's all about capturing your agency and actually having it work for you, or work for you in that sense. I think the second thing is like Web3 inherently is financialized, right? Like everything is a transaction, whether that is real currency or social currency, cultural currency. Somebody is exchanging something for something else. And many people, in many ways, if you don't have the right guardrails around what your project, what your community is representative of, then it leaves room for folks to sort of interpret that for you or interpret that for that community. And sometimes you can create a schism when you have folks that are only really interested in just the potential upside or the speculation of how big that upside might be, or how wide or how vast like your community might penetrate a particular market or set of markets. And so you have to always sort of remind people, listen, this is the intent of why we're here. This is why we are, pushing our funds together. This is why we're communicating, because we see this larger goal. And it's okay if you want to speculate on that, if you're passive, if you're like, I want to help because I see the value in this, but I'm not going to contribute. I think that's okay. But what ends up getting an issue is when things get tough and markets get rocky, then those same people come knocking and saying, well, what have you guys done yet? Like, I put 3 ETH in this when you guys started. I bought another 10 ETH worth of NFTs and everything's like 70% off. What's going on? And it's like, well, I mean, you believed in us, so you gave us the money to invest in what we're doing, but like all good things, it takes time. And so that's the other thing that trips people up too, when folks come knocking and saying, hey, like, where's my piece? You have to have the resolve and the fortitude to say, well, listen, like rewards are comparable in relation to what you put in, but also what you contribute. And if you're a passive player, then you are going to be sort of tied to the way the market is working. And there are certain things that we can do to sort of mitigate that. But at the end of the day, this is bigger than you. So I say like those are like really some of the two biggest things that I normally see that create breakdown both in the early stages of kind of porting existing communities into this new paradigm, but then also folks that have already been native. I think sometimes the financialization hurts the most or hits the most, more so than the collective like agency aspect of it.
Yeah, on that subject, perfect setup for something else I was thinking about, which is a question for Izzy. I'd love for you to maybe talk a little bit more in depth about refraction DAO, what it is. And I'm curious specifically with financialization being kind of a two-edged sword, do you think that refraction DAO and the work that y'all are doing could exist in a world without crypto? And how are you navigating the challenges that Sirsu just talked about?
That's a really good question. So Refraction is a collective of music artists, visual artists, and I think people who just really generally appreciate culture. I think that maybe to answer your last question first, if I think that it could exist in a world without crypto, yes, I think so. I think that coordinating people who are passionate and share values around music and art and culture is totally possible. I think that coordinating at like this scale, probably not. And I think trying to have incentive mechanisms that make people want to participate and encourage them to like have investment in, for instance, like our creative grants program, like being able to apply to the creative grants program and also like vote on the applications that we receive is not something that's, I think, done in this kind of really distributed way. Like there are obviously like grants programs and voting bodies and awards bodies that do this kind of thing, but not where it's like your community is deciding essentially who's getting funds allocated. And I think it's in a much less like stratified way where I think with so many music and culture organizations, it's the same people who get shine and who get access and resources. It's kind of like a snowball effect. And I think with Refraction, we're really focused on just people who are doing interesting and cool work. And because there's so much less of a focus on like one particular region or one medium, I think we see a lot of different artists that aren't like maybe the people that, within music, for instance, like not the same people over and over again. I also think just in terms of like the way that I think about like Red Bull Music Academy a lot in terms of like what it did for music a couple of years ago in terms of putting people on, like doing really cool festivals, kind of like bridging the gap between like underground and mainstream artists. And there's like probably, to me, I don't know if other people agree, but like a really big vacuum in that space for like curating really, really cool music and art festivals that kind of like make connections for people and really are really well curated and thought through. And it's interesting because a lot of the people in Refraction who like work on the curatorial side, editorial side, like come from like, they're not necessarily like crypto native. Like we have people from like The Lot, we have people from RBMA, we have people from UTech. And I think that like, because of the tools and technology, people are way more reinvigorated to like think about doing festivals and doing curation and doing editorial work, because they're not so focused on like, oh, I have to do some like really lame brand partnership with some like soda company in order to pull this off. It's way more about the people who are involved and everyone is aligned around what matters, prioritizing artists, thinking about like fair compensation, like, being able to like really kind of like handhold and like walk alongside artists instead of like being extremely exploitative and thinking about how can we get the most out of somebody. It's really a lot more about thinking through, you know, what's best for Refraction is also like what's best for the artist that we work with. So it was a little bit long-winded, but yeah, I think that what we're doing in some ways could be done in Web 2, but I think because of the landscape, probably not, because a lot of people who do the work have been burned or like lost faith in like legacy systems for doing this kind of stuff. Yeah.
And Elijah, in kind of a similar vein, the communities that you work with, the spaces that you're in, you mentioned that a lot of them aren't yet kind of like plugged into what's going on in this space. I'm curious about why you think that is, and what kind of hurdles need to be gotten over for them to start to experiment.
Yeah, in music, people are still working like in a pop star format. So in campaigns, you know, like releasing albums and then going to send things to press, and my manager's going to do this, and agent. They're not really thinking about, you know, the ways they can kind of always be on or be part of things, even if they're at a certain level. So you have this kind of weird bottleneck that happens with people that maybe have put out good work and have been platformed to a level. They kind of get plateaued. They don't know what to do next. They think, oh, maybe I'll do more PR. Maybe I can get onto a website that will give me better press. I'm like, no, you should be joining the things where there's other creatives that you can bounce off and be given as much as you're taking. But I don't think people are seeing it in that way most of the time. So you kind of have this weird dynamic where, say like someone's releasing an album and then they'll be like, hey, Elijah, I need a Web3 strategy for this. Like, can I make some NFTs of my album? Like, they don't know what they're talking about or anything like that, but they know that it's a space where there's a lot of artists and creatives, but it's something that's nearly like an afterthought rather than something that they're building into, you know, the way they're creating, or something that they genuinely want to engage in with people. And it's a shame because in that, I guess, that 2-year period where everyone was at home, a lot of people that I know, and I'm sure most of us, have battled with like not being able to kind of concentrate on creating or being part of communities. And now there is this kind of other thing. People just want to be outside. They want to be at festivals, want to be, you know, in the park, and maybe not at a computer so much. So there's some of the best artists I know just won't, I don't know, use Twitter or use a computer for beyond making the tunes. And I guess what I'm trying to do is just be an easy bridge to that. It's like, hey, there's someone doing this good thing, or people not fearing it and making it as part of their day-to-day routine, like how they'll check Instagram, they would, you know, check in on this like thing that's going on and see another kind of pipeline of artists apart from the people that they might be, you know, sharing festival bills with or sharing club night bills with, because there's so many people that are creating great work, like Izzy said, but maybe not, you know, playing shows or already like being platformed at a level. But in these communities, they're already there making cool work.
Something that kind of just came to mind that actually wasn't kind of what I had prepped, but I'm kind of curious to get your take on it, and maybe Sirsu as well. I've noticed like a lot of artists talking about sort of the pressure that's put on them, especially if they're in major label deals, to like produce massive amounts of content, right? And it's like the work of being an artist is not just the production of the artistry, it's the production of the marketing around it. And to Sirsu's point earlier, a lot of stuff in Web3 does require this like proactive engagement and this ability to like get in the ring and stay in the ring. So I'm curious, from your point of view, like, are artists who kind of like move into this space potentially replacing one burden with another? And if not, like, what's the real net benefit to them ultimately? Because they still have to do some extra work, right? But what's the potential gain for them there?
I think it's depth. To me, like, I think people have, oh, I've got to make 100 tunes instead of 10. It's like, no, it's like give an opportunity for people to understand the one tune or the, you know, 2 or 3 tunes that you're working on at a level that you might not do on Instagram or TikTok, and really like being open to exchange. Like, oh, this is maybe what I would have done, or just having a conversation about things. Like a lot of artists I work with, I guess they put out work in a way that isn't conversational. It's like, I'm excited to release my song, you listen, bye. And I think we're all getting so much more out of the exchange and the conversation and going back and forth and changing things and letting people, you know, obviously remix and play around with ideas, maybe take it out of a musical space. There's so much, like, it's like, there's like, yeah, literally infinite possibilities when it's brought to the artist. But yeah, usually things aren't framed that way from the beginning, and maybe that's not in their head, but I try and push people to let the art go, like, and let it, you know, play around in spaces that they might not be like familiar or comfortable with yet. Just
one question that I wanted to run by all of you, really. So I'll say the question and maybe throw it to one of you. I'm curious how in this space you square the difference between sort of the co-production and co-creation of culture and quality control. You know, in other words, how do you maintain standards in a world where DAOs might be more prevalent, more and more people might be collaborating together for a certain end result? I'm gonna throw it to Sirsu on this one first.
That's a great question. I think for me, it's like, I approach it the same way I approach work, art, or just general life, right? Like I know when people, excuse me, when they saw NFTs, a lot of people were like, oh, most of NFTs are garbage. And it's like, well, I mean, that's kind of to be expected, right? Like, before any of us become good at what we do a lot of things wrong at first. We do a lot of things that like we may not like, that we like, but it's not quite where we want it to be, right? And so there's always going to be like this aspect of, I don't necessarily use the word waste, but like just this output that we generate that gets us closer and closer to our goal. Like, if we all had the ability to do it like the exact way that we wanted to, as perfect as we could the first time, you know, I think we would have a completely different world that we'd be living in, but we don't. Like, we're formed off of the mistakes that we make, and mistakes that are done publicly, at least in this kind of forum, allows other people to collectively find ways to help solve issues so that you can make a better choice in the future. And then also that can create a ripple effect for other people to make better choices. It doesn't necessarily always work like that, but that's sort of like me being optimistic. But I think like, the best way to engage, or to at least try to formulate quality, is always having a North Star. Like, what's the thing, or what are the aspects that are guiding you along your process? And do you have, if we're talking about DAOs, for instance, like, are your core contributors, your main community, also aligned in that? Because as you're all collectively figuring out what looks good or what's good to put out, then you can look at that North Star as your guide and say, well, is it hitting these things? And I think at a certain point in time, you even interrogate what the North Star is, because maybe you've hit that point and now you need to go somewhere else. Maybe you've decided that we've tried this aspect and it doesn't necessarily work, so we need to figure out something else, right? But it's always about having constant communication, and developing alignment on where to move. And sometimes I'll even say this too, which is kind of counter to DAOs, but not really, that you don't need to rely on everyone to make a decision at all, like all the time, right? Like, there are certain things that like require you to make a very snap decision, and you should feel, again, that agency to do so and be okay, because the community can back you, right? It's not necessarily just going and doing a round robin and asking every single person, are you okay with this decision? Are you okay with this decision? But knowing that like everyone is aligned, at least more in the meta context of what your overall mission is, that you have the freedom and the space to execute as you need to, or as other people may need to. So.
Andrea, same question. How do you maintain the vision for She Said So as you start to wade into the world of Web3 with it?
Yeah, I mean, I already kind of hinted at the fact that, you know, our community is pretty big at this point, and as the more you scale, the more difficult it is to keep those things in check within a Web2 kind of ecosystem, especially. And so for us, there are two layers of, I guess, curation. On one hand, we do curate our community to welcome people who share the same values with us. So for example, if you're a white cis woman and you want to join She Said So, you must demonstrate in some way that you understand intersectionality and that you come into this community with that understanding and you're navigating it, right? And you're occupying space in that way, very mindfully. or yeah, if you're, you know, if like me, I'm a white woman, cis white woman, but I'm from Romania, Eastern Europe, you know, as a result of that, I think I have different sensibilities towards other people's struggles. And so that's pretty easy to do at the beginning, right? There are more or less different ways in which you can kind of introduce questions through the application process that help you identify that. We have, you know, we also created resources like our own intersectionality style guide, for example, that we like push to people from the very beginning as they're trying to join our community, for them to understand, oh, I need to like spend 15, 20 minutes, you know, applying to become a member. I don't just have to like pay for it, you know, buy my way into, but I have to spend a lot of time digesting all this information and like, you know, presenting myself to them. And so some people quit, like some people just don't even go through that process because they don't want to, you know, make the effort. And those aren't the people that we want in our community. But most people do make the effort. And then the second layer of curation for us is, you know, ultimately we are a community of music industry professionals, creators, artists, and so on. And there's a ton of music out there, and it's hard to make good music, right? It's hard to make good shit that you put out into the world. And most amazing things tend to have a ton of people behind them, right? Again, an example of how collaboration works best. So at that layer, that's where things get quite difficult within the Web2 space, because we want to be a community that's accessible to all, that promotes, you know, everyone as someone with potential. But at the same time, when it comes to creating music or putting out music projects, ultimately the ones that are, you know, better quality, whatever that means to different people, will ultimately emerge, at least in our community. In the real outside music industry world, things are still a little bit different, right? And so how do you manage that? How do you curate, you know, in a democratic way where the entire community is participating in that curation without having the Web3 tools? That's where I'm getting a little stuck, you know. That's where it's still a bit more centralized, our community, from a curation perspective. Ultimately, you know, everything does get to me and the various other people who are part of my core team, and ultimately we make that decision. And the way that those options trickle down to us, again, it's a very opaque kind of process, and I really wanted to make as transparent as possible so that we can truly give the chance to anyone in the community, even if they're in like a small village in Romania, they barely have internet access. But if their art is really amazing, they don't need to have a huge network and huge social media following. They have She Said So, you know, they have a place where they can put their art out, and there's a better chance for them at it being seen.
Izzy, it's 10 years from now. The floor on all refraction NFTs is like 500 ETH, and ETH is at 10,000. How do you maintain a curatorial edge at that point when something pops off in the space? And a lot of times its cultural value is somewhat intrinsically tied to its financial value.
Wow, that is a really hard question. I think that going back to thinking about art, and art is subjective, and like the value that we place on it is like subjective, whether it's like because of like the way that we appreciate its aesthetics, or because of the fact that we're really driven by the financialization of it and the upside on, you know, buying something and making money on it. But I think having a values aligned team and values aligned community that has like a shared understanding, whether it's through like SOPs, like standard operating procedures, or a manifesto, or a way or framework to think about what matters and why it matters, can, you know, like other folks have said, like serve as a North Star, because it's kind of the same thing when, you know, things go up and when things go down. It's like it really shakes how people think about value and what matters. So I think having something to return to that's like shared language, shared documentation, shared values, that can serve as like the grounding point, whether something is up or down, would make sense to me. And I also think there's room for expertise, always, you know, like just because everyone is in this, you know, in a DAO together doesn't mean that like someone's actual experience and expertise in curation or producing or whatever, like should just become, you know, distributed to everyone. It's like, I think we can trust people who have expertise in an area and lean on them when maybe like it's not the best decision for like a, you know, to ask every single member or to put it to like a vote. I think there's definitely room for expertise.
Just to drill into that a little bit further, I'm curious, like, because you have people with strong backgrounds and like name brand experience, have there been situations where even at that level, there've been like clashes of personality or different POVs on who deserves a look from an event or not, and how those things get handled?
I don't know if there's been like necessarily like clashing, but I think there's been like maybe, you know, definitely different point of views about like who to book for something or like why. But I think ultimately everyone trusts each other enough, and I think maybe that's like the grounding point, that like ultimately if someone feels really strongly about a decision, and it's in their area of expertise, like everyone is aligned enough to trust that person to make a decision. I mean, none of this is like life or death, like booking someone for a show. So I think a lot of it does come down to trust and a lot of conversation, honestly. Like I think a lot of things just get like worked out in like long dialogues when we have like curatorial team meetings around like, okay, like what do we want to accomplish for this festival? Like, what is the sound we're looking for? Like, who's within our community that might make sense? So a lot of it just gets like hashed out in conversation in a really like, not like snapshot voting way, but just like real communication between people. Yeah.
Cool. And Elijah, I'm curious, like for, again, the artists that you care about, the community that you work within, I think a lot about how like technology has been always this like core component and driver of like the success and flourishing of a lot of artists in like the grime and UK drill space. I'm curious then, like, what would success look like for the artists that you work with as they like enter the Web3 space? Like, what do you want to see kind of the legacy become over the next few years?
That is a hard question. I think more of us has been technically savvy and not fearing like information, not fearing learning new things, not being intimidated by a lot of like the jargon that you're kind of like beaten over the head with as you enter the space. So much of the language and kind of direction comes from like the US. So like here in the UK, like we've just got different like politics, different problems, different ways of looking at things. And I want people to, yeah, just to feel like a kind of confidence. And to be honest, like just following on what everyone's saying about creating stuff, it's not the real win, but one of the wins and kind of things I get people to focus on is like, did you have fun making this? Are we all having fun here? Like when we're doing the DAOs and putting together these crews and teams and labels and parties, whatever we're doing, it's like, this is supposed to be fun. And I guess the moment it gets too, you know, analytical, technical, you know, number goes up, number goes down. It's like, that's not what any of us got into this for. So, you know, the creative, you know, being fun to make, fun to share, like fun to exchange, like that being like the driving core of, you know, what we do. Like my background is in pirate radio, and I mean, the MCs won't say this, but I'm sure like they loved turning up to MC pirate radio. They may not describe it that way, but why would they keep going back every week to just MC for free? Is because they loved it. Obviously, they thought it could get them somewhere and, you know, boost their name, but there was like a deep love for creating, and this space will test that for you. Your love of creating and curation and all the kind of language and things that you have to go through to get there. But if that can enable more and, you know, creating things that might not have been created without these mechanisms, then I mean that's a strong thing for the next yeah, 5-10 years, like creating things that would have never existed. Obviously tunes, the man them are always going to make tunes, but I don't know, like connecting with other people, other communities might not have happened.
Amazing. Similar question to you, Sirsu, like coming from a design background, working in the gaming space, etc. Like, what's the end game for you and kind of your involvement in the Web3 space? What do you want to see flourish?
For me, I just want people to be true holders of their own path, right? Like, for my goal is, if I can get one person to understand that things in life happen because they are walking in the direction for things to happen, that they're the co-creator of the life that they live, that they lead, and they can take that and like charge like their own creativity, their own lives, whatever it is that they want to do. And if Web3 is the catalyst for that, if I can get one person to feel that, then that can be a ripple for other people. And I could tell you, as a designer, I worked in ad agency, I've worked in consumer products, healthcare, you name it. I was in every industry, at least, for over a 10-year span. And I never really felt like there was anything that was capturing me enough to go like that extra mile and like really embodied what I felt design could do as a catalyst or a tool for empowerment and agency, until I found like the Web3 space. And since being a part of it and helping push artists through the mint fund, or being able to help gamers figure out that they can monetize their likeness in very unique and amazing ways with the power and tools of Web3, or to even inspire the aspects of what it means to be competitive or to engage in competition. I think all these things are endeavors that really help people discover themselves through this work. And if so, allows them to live and lead healthier and better lives, whether both hopefully financially and also creatively too. So, I mean, that's really my end game, is to just get as many people on board with that as possible. Everything else is an added effect.
Cool. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So Izzy, Andrea, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I'm just excited, honestly. I know there's a bit of gloom and doom out there, and on the music industry side, there is still a lot of resistance, I have to say, from a lot of people who, are not willing to make the effort. It's scary, it's scammy out there, but I truly think it's the future of everything. The Web3 space will be the new internet, and I'm so excited about all the ways in which we will be able to collaborate, both in terms of culture creation, as well as how we govern ourselves as societies. That is the thing that will probably be a big game changer, and will probably take some time before we get there.
Cool. Well, I'll just take this last minute to thank everyone for participating. Thank everyone for watching. You heard it here first. DAOs, kind of underrated, a little bit overrated because of the VCs. Technology, kind of whack, but cool if you use it right. And if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jose. And thank you so much, all the participants, for sharing, all these fantastic insights. Now, let me just here. So where we are. I am such a boomer. I have no clue what I'm doing here. You should be, I think, able to see. Oh no. It doesn't matter. Do you want to see a slide? No, you don't want to see a slide. What you want is more insight, more information, and some fantastic speakers that will expand your frontal lobes. Do you see somebody tell me, do you see my wonderful slides? Maybe. I don't know. We'll never find out. So this was sorry, lost my red thread. So we are going into the next panel, which I'm particularly excited about as well. I've already mentioned it. We need to talk about the social political realities of these technologies, and particularly about agency, especially because Web3 is so much about language, about agency for communities that had no agency in the platform capitalist age that we hopefully exit at some point. And for that, we teamed up with a wonderful organization that I encourage you all to follow, Mutual Love. Anuva and Alex will be hosting from Mutual Love this conversation. Unfortunately, one of our participants could not make it, but we still have Lee from Super Rare, Zach from the Queer Museum of Digital Art, Raven from the 50mm Collective, Jack from Polygon, and my colleague and friend Jem from Zora. And they are going to talk about the trans and queer and the cultural and economic ecosystems on chain. So I think we're good to go live. And I'll just hand over the microphone and the video space to Anuva and Alex and all the participants. Please enjoy, friends.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? I'm excited to be here.
Hey,
so let's kick it off.
Let's do this. Thanks, everyone. Hey, everyone. My name is Anuva Kalawar. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in New York City. I'm the co-founder of Mutual Love, the NFT marketplace and Web3 ecosystem centering and celebrating trans and queer creators and culture makers and participating in mutual aid and generational wealth building. I'm also a painter, curator, occasional DJ, and digital community equity activist. We are so excited to be here today representing Mutual Love. Thank you, Zora and ETH Global, for having us at Metabolism this year. And thank you to this incredible, brilliant group of trans and queer Web3 visionary leaders for making the time to be in conversation today. We are so grateful to know you and to be building alongside all of you.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name is Alex Guerra. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in Austin, Texas. I am one of the co-founders of Mutual Love as well, as a content creator and community builder. As a trans man myself, I'm super excited to be here having this conversation with other trans and queer people in the Web3 space. It is much needed and very refreshing. So we're going to start out with some introductions from our amazing panelists here, starting with Lee, then Zach, Raven, Jack, and then Jem. If y'all could just start with names, intros, pronouns, creative curatorial practice, and what you do in Web3. So I'll pass it off to Lee.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with everyone and sharing in this very queer, happy space within Web3. It's so exciting. It tickles me fancy. But so like said, Lee Knight, I use they, them pronouns. I was with the I was working as the technical community manager with Super Rare. Now that's kind of transitioned more into DEI initiatives within the Super Rare space. And then also I do a lot with ETH Denver. And so I've been working on that and building that out as well. So if you're coming to ETH Denver, please let me know and we can get things happening. Yeah, I've been in the space since 2017. And so just trying to make the world a better place for artists.
Thanks so much, Lee. Hi, my name is Zach Krevitt. I originally entered the Web3 space as an artist. My pronouns are they, them. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York. So I have been a photographer for years and years and years, was just really dissatisfied with the traditional gallery space. And when I found Web3, I just had so much more power and control over my work there. Originally started as a photographer, but have transitioned into working a lot with AI really heavily. Throughout that sort of journey, I kind of just noticed that there really wasn't a lot of representation for queer and trans creators, institutions kind of holding them up. So I, along with some of my friends in the space, founded the Queer Museum of Digital Art, QMODA, which is essentially a preservation effort, collecting work, preserving work, long-term, permanently, and displaying it and uplifting queer artists in the space. So we're really a group dedicated to hyping up and collecting from queer and trans artists. And it's been a journey. Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, thank you so much first and foremost for your time and energy, and thank you Alex and Anuva for this opportunity, as well as ETH Global. My name is Raven Trammell, aka Raven 50mm. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a photographer and community builder out based in Los Angeles. And aside from my artistry, building the 50mm collective with Chelsea Quintela, our co-founder, and an incredible artist in her own right, has been a major focus currently within my journey in the NFT space. Last year, I did a lot of experimenting with minting my photography, and towards the end of last year, really leaned into the 50mm collective, which is an NFT art collective founded by BIPOC LGBTQIA artists who are dedicated to providing resources and opportunities to historically underrepresented communities. We believe diversity and inclusion should be the forefront of Web3 as it is a global market. And we also believe that being an artist for a living shouldn't be some unobtainable dream. And our goal is to fuse together culture, community, and curation to further uplift and enrich the global art world. And so, yes, that's a bit about myself and the collective. And thank you all again for having me here.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so honored to have been asked to speak at this panel. It's really important. My name is Jack. I use she, her pronouns. I am based here in Los Angeles. During my day, I work at Polygon. I'm the community development manager there at Polygon, so I oversee the ecosystem of the blockchain. And the real work, the real fun work that I really enjoy is all of my artistic practices that NFTs and crypto have kind of found this beautiful outlet for, and this really deep work. So I'm a dancer, and I work with a motion capture project that'll be bringing that data information to blockchain, which is really exciting. We go to market soon, so more about that later. And then the other initiative that I work for is I'm also a musician, and I work for an extension of a Web3 of a record label, a Web3 extension of a record label that already exists here in Los Angeles, and its core root is uplifting underrepresented genres and people. So really finding the outlets for some of these expressions that don't normally get uplifted, and by people that are historically underrepresented in this space. So that's kind of the work that I'm doing as well.
It's me. Hi, I'm Jem, and my pronouns are she or they. I'm a singer-songwriter, generative artist, and full stack creative technologist. And I also work at Zora doing developer relations. I guess the thing that I'm stuck on is, as a technologist, having access to a medium that is essentially forever. And I think that is just such a powerful concept to be playing with when we consider queer and trans and other marginalized voices. So I'm just so excited to be working on technology with other people who really seem to be building a primitive but extremely long-term meaningful storytelling.
Amazing. What a great note to end on. Segues perfectly into the first question. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves, and we'll just get right into it. Just broadly for our audience, we're going to touch on archives, building community first, and gate breaking on chain today with these leaders and creators. We're just going to let the conversation flow with these three questions. So I'm going to kick it off. A lot of our intention at Mutual is informed by the concept of archiving and instigating trans and queer cultural and economic equity and legacy on the future of the internet. The concept of archives in trans and queer communities is nuanced. Many histories have been suppressed by dominating forces, but trans and queer creators have been around impacting culture since the beginning of time. We are ancient and sacred beings. We archive in community, in creative practice, in incredible, multifaceted, and multicultural legacies. In a world of surveillance, censors, and shadow bans, in a future impacted by automation, metaverse tech, and more, how does building on chain shift the concept of the queer archive from your unique perspective? And how does that inform your practice as a creator and contributor in Web3? We would love to start this convo off with Zach from Kimoda.
Sure. So this is something that is completely central to our project. In a lot of my work sort of before this and now still during was with AIDS activism. And when you work in AIDS activism, what you hear over and over and over again is how much was lost. The people, of course, tragically, but their artwork, right? Their creation, their music. So much of that was lost. There was an effort at the time when people would pass for friends and family members to preserve the work. Sometimes that work would be donated to various galleries or museums. It was safe for a time. You know, what we've heard from from artists involved in this process and from these institutions is that they are no longer really safeguarding these works. A lot of the works are ending up out on the street because either the institution has changed their mind as to the value of the work, or they no longer have room to store the work, or whatever the reason may be. It's just not a permanent and safe solution. So with that in mind, that was really central to creating a permanent archive on chain. You know, even long after I am here, right, there will still be this blockchain record of these works, who it's by, when it was made, what mediums are in there. And I think that is so important. It's something that is really unique to the space. You know, we've seen how vulnerable artwork is to time. And we've seen legacies lost. We've seen creativity lost. We've seen culture destroyed in this sense. So yeah, so for me, this on-chain aspect is everything. I mean, that was what really kind of gave us the you know, the courage to do something like this, because if it wasn't for on-chain technology, blockchain technology, there's no way I could store all these works or guarantee that I wouldn't move in some time and I'd have to deal with like where they go safely. You know, are they being damaged by weather or by, you know, mold or even these kinds of things, or whether someone's just going to put them out on the street. So yeah, it is central to what we're building, and I think is really central to preserving the legacy of trans and queer people globally.
Yeah, if I can chime in for a hot second. Yeah, I mean, I think that like absolutely, I'm in complete agreement with what Zach has just said, and he, you know, was very well put. But I think that even like on a grander scale, or let me back up. Before I became a software engineer, I double majored in art history and music, and I'm a trombonist and an electronic musician, and you know, I'm touring and playing and all that stuff. And so you know, people come to town, they call me up, hey, you want to sit in with us? Hey, we're in town, we're recording, you want to record with us? Like, I have been screwed out of like so much, not even talking about royalties, just credit to be able to say this is what I did and to be able to prove that. And I mean, just why is it so hard to just get your name added at the end of the discography? And so with that in mind, with Web3, with being able to preserve what you have contributed to, like one of the first projects that I was contributing to when I first joined the Web3 space was Ujo. And you know, it was fantastic to be able to see everyone who was responsible for getting a track developed and being able to even see like the royalty splits of how that broke down. It's just, you know, it gave me hope for artists and musicians, but I just throw them all into the category of artists. It's giving me further hope for artists in the future to be able to preserve what you have spent. You know, I started playing trombone when I was 10, and I've spent so much time mastering that craft, but like nobody really unless you are a musician, nobody really understands what it takes to be able to be skilled at what you're doing. They just think like, oh, you're just a musician, you can show up, you can just do this thing, here's $20, call it good at the end of the day. I'm like, bro, like to be able to play this like little thing that like, you know, sit in, yeah, you play some air trumpet, and you want me to figure it out. You know, that took me 20 years to be able to do that. You know, it's not, sure, you only see the front end of that because, you know, I'm a skilled musician and it looks easy, but you know, that took time and practice, and to be able to preserve that, and then, you know, to be able to demonstrate what your history is without worrying about it being misconstrued or just like simply just taken off, is what Web3 is able to offer in ways that Web2 is so limited and is so just stuck in the past. And so, you know, this ultimately, it's just so much more hope is now accessible for preserving the integrity and the work that musicians and artists have, you know, spent so much, shed tears and blood over to accomplish. And, you know, being able to share that just like with a click of a button. So.
I'll add on to that because I'm a musician as well, and I definitely know people do not understand that you know, what you're seeing is like the culmination of these 20 years. This 5 minutes that I totally killed it is 20 years of practice, you know, to be able to do that. It's also the same with dancers. I recently hosted a panel with Polygon, and I showcased one of my dancer friends, and people were very blown away by the fact that you could put dance NFTs on the internet, but it was a way to capture value. It's a way for people who have never been able to capture any value to find this value. Going back to like the concept of the archive, here in Los Angeles at USC, there is a queer and gay archive at USC called One Archive. So I went there, and it's only one type of person, which is like the stereotypical like Tom of Finland, like white gay man from the certain era. There was one little corner of lesbians, and I was like, this is not enough. This is not enough. This is not enough representation. This is not intersectional at all. Fortunately, I was there because a friend of mine was showing and displaying and pointing that fact out. And it was called, the show is called The Invisible Archives by Prima Janakandra Sakuntapai, who is a non-binary performative lecturist and sculpturist. Going back again to the archive, they had to have all of this permission to do all of this work at USC, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, Web3 enables you to do this all permissionlessly, which is the hugest like paradigm shift that we've ever seen. We've always had to ask for permission. We've always had to fight just to express ourselves even visually. It's exhausting. And so Web3 is this like almost like this outlet, like all of these things, all of these songs that I've sat on, all of this work that I've sat on, that I've been waiting for a gallery. I don't have to wait anymore. I can just put it out on the marketplace. So that is where the equity of the technology comes into play for me.
And if I can touch one more time on the Queer Archive, I think that it is so important for our histories. I mean, like, if you kind of go back, so I'm also a bull rider, and so like I compete in Western sports, and so America thinks that bull riders, that cowboys are blonde hair, blue eyes, and like everything has been written out in terms of, you know, black cowboys, rancheros, like all of this has just been completely erased to fulfill what Hollywood has deemed attractive. And so with these archives, you can preserve these histories in ways that well, two things. You can preserve it in ways that you haven't been able to do it before, but then secondly, you have the opportunity to to preserve it and to share it. And so I think that's like one of the bigger things is like getting more people into this space so that we have another chance to write histories in ways that are actually authentic and more meaningful, but then we know that they will be preserved. And so, you know, it's just building up our community with other like-minded individuals so that it doesn't happen again. Like we have the opportunity to actually progress and not be stuck in the trends of what has historically happened in the world.
Amazing. Cool. Raven, Jen, do you want to add anything? If not, we can move on to the next question that kind of segues into.
Yeah, I do want to, I just really loved what Lee just said about how important this opportunity is. And I feel like that's like what I personally stress the most is, you know, as a trans man, as a Black trans man in America, like this is really our shot. Like a lot of historically underrepresented communities have been just pushed aside and kind of honestly forgotten and not considered. And this is within this space, you're able to create the opportunities for yourself and for your communities, you're able to, with those opportunities, empower people, and that creates hope, and hope is unmatched, you know, like that fuels you, and that motivates you to keep on going. So it's so important, and I just have to like shout out each and every one of us who are here in this space as people who, you know, are usually an afterthought. We're here every day and like doing what needs to be done to enrich our communities. And it is a constant grind, but I just have to acknowledge that and just say, like, I'm proud of all of us, you know, like we're really here doing what needs to be done. And shout out to all of y'all for that. So thank you.
That was so beautiful, Raven. I guess like the thing that I want to add to that is that, you know, as a species, like we're animals that tell stories, right? That's kind of who we are. And so our mythologies carry us. And I think, you know, I muted myself. In the past, we've seen what happens when specific political groups ban books and try to erase history. And I think you know, honestly, I think we're seeing maybe like some of that energy coming back into the world. And I think that's scary, but we need these stories to prevail. And that is, and it's not just queer stories, but I think queer stories have been so often left out of this. But, you know, I think what the blockchain offers is the chance to preserve stories of hope and of optimism and of like utopian visions to carry us through whatever kind of period we might be coming into in history. And I think it's quite special to know that whatever lies ahead, the hope and the optimism that we can encode into the blockchain are books that can't be burnt. So, and I think that's just a really powerful concept.
Amazing. I'm just in awe of everybody here. So thank you for sharing just beautiful words and wisdom. Amazing. So, you know, speaking of, you know, communities and all of that, you know, we're super dedicated to building community first at Mutual Love. And it's something that we've both been doing in our careers in general. So it comes very naturally. And we think of the blockchain as a tool to reflect the already existing queer and trans ecosystem and further amplify and connect communities that are underpaid or even underbanked. Mutual aid is part of these ecosystems, and blockchain can be a tool to build generational equity and access across borders. So from your perspective, how can building on-chain solutions effectively amplify trans and queer creator and cultural economies? And I think we'll start with Raven here.
All right. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the last part of the question for me, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So just, from your perspective, how can building on-chain solutions effectively amplify the trans and queer economies that I guess already exists, and how can blockchain kind of just amplify that, like mutual aid, equity and all that stuff that we are so often looking for as a community.
Okay, thank you. I think we touched on it. I'm not quite sure who it was earlier, but talking about all of this ecosystem being permissionless and us being in control of the ways in which we want to use all of these really powerful tools, such as blockchain, such as NFTs, social tokens. And I think as artists and as already creative beings, we're able to really use these tools in creative ways to not only onboard, but also encourage our communities. For example, with 50mm Collective, we have a 50mm social token. So with every ReadyWare purchase, each consumer earns 10 50mm tokens. And with those tokens, we'll have a marketplace built out and only sell things on that marketplace for 50mm tokens. And you can earn tokens from participating in Twitter spaces or being in the Discord. It's not always about who has the most money or who can collect all these NFTs to unlock this other thing over here or whatever. It's more about, okay, who are the community members who really see the vision and want to contribute to helping build the vision. And those are the contributors who are rewarded with social tokens, and therefore can, who know that the social token aspect, there's a lot of possibilities within this, Web3 space in general, but so with social tokens, I just feel I had an example of like the OVO Fest tickets were like, I don't even know, like $2,000. I don't remember how much they were. They're so crazy expensive though. But I just threw an example of like, if Drake had a OVO social token where his fans got, X amount for downloading his album, listening to tracks, for buying merch, whatever, and then they could contribute some of those tokens to the sale of those tickets rather than selling their computers or doing wild things to get that ticket money. That's just like, one example of how this ecosystem can be equitable for a larger, a broader audience and broader community.
So there are also, parts of the world where being a part of the queer community, being represented at any sort of, queer capacity is very illegal. And so there are so many, just like a very simple, basic example is, trying to create some sort of queer alliance or community in one of these places where it is illegal and you need funding. And if you cannot create a bank account affiliated with the actual name of what you're doing because it is illegal, and then it could be tracked and you are blocked before you can even start. And so by being able to utilize any of on-chain marketplaces or anybody can send you funds and you don't have to lie about it. Just simply straightforward, like, here it is, and these funds are accessible. Unlike, applying for a bank account, then needing to be approved for your bank account, and then how are you going to actually extract those funds and all of that. Just like very simply being able to receive financial support in other ways, where in other situations where if you're going the traditional route, you would be blocked before you could even start or even to make your case. And so there are from a foundational level of being able to start your organization, Web3 offers a solution.
Yeah, and I think that we're also getting to kind of the heart of the problem, which is like that conversion. I think that on-chain solutions are amazing, but I think that if we're talking about underbanked or unbaked people, until there is a system for housing and food, common goods that will accept these on-chain tokens, be they ETH or Polygon or a social token from a group. I think until we reach that point, I think it's going to be really hard to have these on-chain solutions go as far as they really need to go to truly solve this problem. So I think that there really needs to be some incredible minds out there, and I think people are working on this, but I don't think we've really quite solved it yet. That would really address housing first and foremost, and allow these interactions and these accumulation of tokens, whether it be from actions like Raven mentioned or from selling NFTs, to go directly into food and housing. So I think that we have a long way to go, but I think that there are some really incredible people working on this problem. And or banking systems that can guarantee privacy and safety to queer and trans people, that will allow this sort of system to happen to extract those funds. Love it or hate it, we just saw what happened with Tornado Cash. And there's a clear kind of crackdown on financial privacy happening. And that was really a big setback. Tornado Cash is obviously rife with its own problems, but it did ensure a certain amount of safety for the types of people that Lee are talking about and the situations are talking about. So privacy tools and mass adoption for common goods, I think, really needs to happen for on-chain solutions to truly empower our communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the bigger thing, like, none of this is going to happen unless we get more people. Like with mass adoption is like the first step. And then we're actually probably like education, but then mass adoption. And so like we all need each other. We all need to share with each other and support each other. And then I think if you're creating a DAO, like actually use your DAO properly. It's not just a buzzword. Like there are actual components to it that officially make it a DAO, and how you operate, and like actually, needing quorum to, move a proposal. But I think that, again, these like foundational elements to create a future that will be more sustainable and safer for individuals within the queer community are accessible, but we need that education to onboard people and mass adoption so that it is so that people don't think that it's not a viable option for, transferring funds or ideas or projects. I mean, if you can think it, you can make it. And so we just need everybody, like, it's just a little bit of Kool-Aid, drink it, it's fine. So join us. Come hither.
Love that. Jack, did you want to speak? Okay, sorry.
Sure. Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, I just unmuted. Yeah, no, I think it comes down to like, if you make a space that is hospitable to our concerns and to our perspectives, and that where they have space to live and be heard and be seen, that's really going to draw a lot more people to the space as well. Beyond being like educated and beyond finding this place of belonging, it's also just holding space. And I would say, like, in order for the community to embrace this technology more, I think we can just all embrace our own queerness more and really dive into like what makes us safe and what makes us feel good, and really find moments to showcase those attributes in the community. Because I think we're all sort of in agreement that values alignment is much more important than any sort of other like facet that may come up that may be in alignment, because if your values are aligned, then everything else can fall into place. But going back to how this on-chain building can change the way that we show up in these spaces, it goes back to the permissionlessness and the immutability of these archives, of these records. So just keep making that beautiful, queer, welcoming space, and we'll just have more to add to the archives because of it.
Thank you. We have about 14 minutes left. Jem, did you want to say anything about this topic before we move on to our last couple questions?
Feel pretty good on that last one.
Okay, awesome. So as we've talked about what, hope and optimism and embedding our values and our cultural alignments, and on chain also accessibility and education and storytelling has come up. So we talk a lot about accessibility and gate breaking at Mutual Love. And like many of you have noted, a lot of the concepts in Web3 are fairly inaccessible. Onboarding is also a very broad term. There's community building, storytelling, UX, there's content, bridge applications, etc. So we would love to hear, from your perspective, what actual accessible onboarding looks like for the global LGBTQ community, or even the local communities that you are part of from your perspective. And one tip you'd give to a queer trans creator or contributor entering Web3 in the audience today. I would love to start with Jack for this question.
Sure. I think we have to be very mindful of intersectionality. I think that's the only way forward, and the only way that we can really truly understand the perspectives globally is by listening to the people who are living those experiences directly. So I find that, embrace your queerness, create this beautiful queer space, but also, ensure that you are honoring where people are coming from and making space for that as well. So that I do see as sort of like a core nugget of how we will onboard the masses, educate the masses, really just build community. It's really just building community, because once everyone's on the same page, then you really can go very far, and then you have other stewards of the community to spread that great word as well. So really just creating space and creating a welcoming environment is really going to take us so much further than anyone else, and I'm totally convinced of that, because this is our chance. Like Raven said, like this is our chance, this is our moment, and as artists and as queer folk, we're not going to let that just slip away. We'll fight for it. That's all I have to say about mass adoption.
I think my tip would be, take a holistic approach to your education. It's not just learning about smart contracts or just learning about this one thing or that one thing, but you really have to, at least in the beginning, kind of be a, have a really holistic approach. So I would say, study marketing, study smart contracts, study social media, study community management. Like, I think taking at least a dip into all of those topics will serve you a lot more than just focusing on one in particular. I think that's what's missing in a lot of Web3 education, is that there's education for, okay, how to write a smart contract, but then, okay, maybe you've written your smart contract and you want to sell some of your artwork, but then you're sort of lost when it comes to marketing. So yeah, just really kind of embracing all different aspects, so that you can be, community is incredible, but at the same time, there's so much power to be found in being able to cover all these aspects, and then linking up with other community members that are also kind of talented in a lot of different places.
I think where I would add to that is, for everyone involved, like, let's be really conscious of what we're onboarding people to and what types of tools that we're recommending people use. I realize that as a newcomer to this space, sometimes, there is a lot of jargon and it's being thrown around, and sometimes it's hard to figure out the differences between different platforms and stuff. But in general, I feel like if someone is trying to sell you something, they're lying to you. If someone is, making you certain promises, they might be lying to you. All I can say is, I try and trust in decentralized and permissionless tools. I try and trust in systems that don't have gatekeepers, even if there are experienced people around to help you learn. That should always be entirely democratized. So, you know, I guess at this point, like, I kind of have to plug Zora, because I feel like that's what we're trying to do, is just give people access to the best tools that we are making for ourselves, and hoping you vibe with those. But we're not trying to sell you anything, and we're not trying to sell you on anything other than giving you the tools to succeed based on, honestly, like, based on the spirit of your own work. And I think that is the magic that people always bring to the space, no matter how experienced they are in Web3 or in crypto. Like, there is some unique magic that is inside everyone. And I think that's the thing that we're excited about seeing. And these are just like these are the technical tools to help people out.
And to piggyback off of what Jem just said, you know, the unique magic that you have within yourself, right? And if you're new to Web3 space, I think a lot of the tools can seem very, very daunting and surprising. And then you think that your magic is not as magical as you once thought it is. It still is. And that's okay. You're learning something. That's, I mean, if you were brilliant at it, like you showed up and you're like, I know everything, then why aren't you running the world? But so, like, aside from that, like, it's okay to be in that place where you need help, and it's okay to ask for help. And so, like, one of the things that I would do at ETH Denver is I put together a number of talks to help people get into the space. And you know, the general term of, you know, onboarding, like, these are people who don't have wallets, don't have any crypto, like, so walk them through the process, walk them through adding tokens to their wallet so that they have some foundational rinsing of what it is to be within the space, and then dropping them some crypto so that they can interact in the space. It's, you know, it's like one thing, like, hey, go get set up, get your wallet going. Good luck to you. See you at this conference. Make sure you're in the hackathon. It's like, that's a lot. That's a big, very big ask. And so, you know, be willing to share what you have learned. I'm not saying give all your time, but if you can, share so that people can learn and ask questions. That's how I got into the space. A friend took me out to brunch, and we went through everything step by step by step. And then before I knew it, now I'm like helping out run ETH Denver. And then secondly, the biggest tip that I have, do what makes you feel good. Do what excites you, because if you're excited about what you're doing, then you're willing to do the work to figure out the components of what you're interested in operates, you know? And so, like, hey, you want to create an NFT, but you know nothing about blockchain, but you're an artist? Okay, start creating your work. How do I get this on the blockchain? Oh, I need a wallet. How do, like all these pieces will come into play, that, and you will have, you know, that your route will be laid out for you on how to understand what you need by following what interests you. So if you're excited about something, follow it.
Love that. Raven, we have like a minute.
Okay.
But I want to give you the floor. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my tip would be to just be intentional with where you're placing your energy within various communities and things like that. It can be the space can be a lot. There's a lot of information. There's a lot going on. It's very fast. Give yourself some grace to, like Lee said, ask the questions. It's okay that's like encouraged here. People are hyped when people don't know things, and they can be like, oh, well, here's how, you know, I can help you, or here's this information. And definitely tap in with the 50mm Collective. I've made a handful of YouTube videos of foundational tips that I wish I knew when I got into this space. How to set up a MetaMask. We have a MetaMask tutorial, and also a tutorial on how to get 50mm social tokens in your wallet. So finding different resources like that provided by communities that have a trustworthy reputation within the NFT space, I think is where I'll leave it. But just I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, and just like speaking with so many amazing people. Like Alex, you said your mind was blown. I'm over here just like, Hey, what? Now I gotta say something. Like, no, just think. I'm so grateful. Thank y'all.
Oh, I feel the same way, but thank you for that. Oh, okay, we're getting updates. We have another 5 minutes, folks. Look at that. Awesome. Cool. But yeah, thank you all. I guess we weren't gonna have time to do this, but now we can. Would love to pass it around. I think Raven just did a little bit of this, but you know, just anything you want to plug before we sign off. Would love to give each person like just a quick minute if you want, and then we'll kind of make room for the next group of panelists.
Yeah, so I'll start. I talk too much, I'm sorry. But one thing that as I mentioned before, like I'm a part of ETH Denver, and I have been since the first ETH Denver, and every year it gets bigger and better, and we are able to divert more and more to our DEI initiatives as well. So I would love, reach out to me on Twitter. You can find me. It's a cool breeze, but it's AKEWL breeze. So it shows how old I am because of the weird spelling. But anyway, and so like reach out to me if you have questions, if you're confused. Like my time is limited, so if I don't get back to you immediately, but know that I will. And I think that's what you need to do in this space is like, feel free, reach out, ask people. And so join me at ETH Denver. You don't know how to get involved in ETH Denver? I'll explain it to you. You want to get involved in the hackathon, but you don't have a technical background? That's okay. There are other ways that you can contribute. There are so many ways that you can contribute in the Web3 space, but the ball is in your court to ask how. So please ask, reach out to me.
Awesome. Okay, I think the other group is here. I just want to, anybody else, just like a quick 30 seconds.
I'll jump in. Yeah, we're excited at Zora, we're excited to support creators of all different types. If you're an artist looking to, really dip your toes into the space for the first time, please come along to Zoratopia events. That's a great onboarding resource. And then for more kind of engineering gleaning questions, come over to, follow around with what we're doing. Zora Engineering on Twitter. Come to, I guess you're at our hackathon. Keep it. You're doing great. Everyone is doing really great. Keep doing exactly what you're doing because you're at our event. So thank you.
Amazing, amazing. All right, everybody. I just want to say thank you one more time. That was just such a hopeful, inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for being with us today, Zach, Jem, Lee, Raven, and Jack. Make sure to check out their projects, which we will share on our Twitter feed post-panel. Make sure to follow us at mutual2_love and at www.mutual.love. Yeah, we're also fundraising for our mirrors, so check that out. Thanks again to everybody for being here and making this possible. And thank you to Zora and ETH Global for this opportunity. So we will see y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See y'all later.
Thank you, everyone, for this incredibly insightful conversation. And as Anuva and Alex just said, please follow every single one of the participants just because they will be a infinite well of insight, knowledge, inspiration, and also if you need guidance. So yeah, I am very excited about the next. And I've been excited about every single one of these conversations, but I'm particularly excited about this one just because not only because we have a fellow Berliner, he is not too far from where I am right now in Prenzlauer Berg. I'm in Wedding, in case you know the geography of Berlin, but he is really an artist that deserves to be called a legend, just because many of the things we do day in, day out wouldn't be the way they are without his work and the work that he had put in, the experiments that he dared to do when nobody thought about them. And we all should be internally grateful for that. But also some of his methods are arcane and mysterious, and I'm very happy that Harm van den Dorpel will tell us all about how he does the beautiful things he does. So please, everyone, a warm applause for Harm van den Dorpel. Please enjoy, friends.
Hi, Michail. Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me? I will be.
Yes, very well.
Excellent. I'll be doing quite a bit of screen sharing. I am usually, when I'm invited to be in panels or give talks, I'm usually asked to talk about the art, the aesthetics, the art historical references. And this time I was asked to actually more like have a technical talk, which is exciting. I rarely get to do that. So I will actually be talking about smart contract programming, and I've been doing that for a while. I think I started playing with Solidity in 2018, 17. And why I think this is interesting to talk about in an art context is because what makes NFTs for me is the fact that they are immutable. So they are to some extent unchangeable, fixed, and that means they are resilient. They cannot be taken down by a government, but also it addresses the difficulty that I experienced earlier before blockchain with digital art, because the software art, digital art is so easy to change. It's so easy to disappear. It's so easy to lose it somehow. And the ephemeral nature of digital art, which I've always loved, is really nicely complemented by blockchain technology, where you can actually fix certain things of your digital artwork. Of course, with the benefit that it is resilient, it cannot be censored, but also it makes it really easier to commodify. So you have this enormous this market of NFTs, for which artists greatly profit. This talk is called on-chain NFTs, and some people might ask, like, aren't all NFTs on-chain? So I'm going to show a few examples of how different NFT projects are on-chain, or to what extent they are not on-chain. And most of the times, the parts that are not on-chain make the artwork more flexible, but also less resilient, and more prone to changing. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show some examples. So can you see my screen now? So this is actually the project I'm going to touch the latest. That is my own project. For you, I think many of you will be familiar with the Ethereum NFT standard, ERC 721, where basically the only thing that is stored on-chain by that specification is who owns which tokens. So you have provenance. The asset that it references, the artwork or the collectible, is most of the time not actually stored on-chain, because that would be way too expensive. And the way a smart contract exposes what it points to or what it represents is by a method called the token UI. I'm showing this quite famous art blocks project by Dimitri Chenyak. So anytime you are on OpenSea, you can actually just go to the contract address. So this is the token ID. I'm going to visit the contract on Etherscan. Go to the contract, read the contract. Everybody can do this. This is just open, and this is free for all. And I'm looking for the token URI. And this is important. I hope you can read this. I might get a bit larger. This is the address that the token is pointing to. Let me make a new text file. So this is just a web page. basically. It's just a JSON file. And if I open it in my browser, you see a whole bunch of properties, the metadata of this token. And this is the one I want to highlight, the media one. And in this case, also the media property also points just to a URL. So in that sense, you could say that this NFT is partially on-chain, the NFT is on-chain, but the assets that it references, the metadata and the image are not. So Artblocks invented another mechanism to still have the code that generates this artwork, to still have it on-chain. And should be somewhere here. Project script by index. So I took the number 13 from the token ID. And I think this project only has one script. So this is a lot of gibberish that I don't expect anybody to understand this. But the interesting thing is that here, that if this is actually the script that generates the image I just showed. Oh, it's gone. But, and with this code, anybody could always reconstruct that token in theory. So one of the things, if I, for example, search for the word stroke, which is a method that's being called a few times, this method stroke is actually not defined in this code. The method stroke is part of P5, and that's a library that is stored on another server. So this makes it flexible, because you couldn't store that whole library on chain. That would be too expensive. But then also by not storing that, you make it fragile again. So there's constant trade-offs in what can you store on chain, how expensive is that, because storing on chain is very expensive in terms of gas, and how flexible are you? Let's see, where was I? I do something similar with that in my own Mutant Garden Seeder, a project that I made about a year ago. Again, I can go to the contract address, look at the contract, read contract. Actually, I have to remember one. I have to remember the token ID. Here. And again, you see, I get just a web address. And if I open that, I get a JSON file. And in this case, the image points to a vector graphic, which is stored on my server. How I solve the problem of resilience, because if my web server is down, where does the NFT go? Is that people can run a desktop application that does calculates the mutations for you. So this is sort of a sidechain that runs parallel to mainnet, and it calculates the mutations, which is important in my project, because in this project the NFTs actually change all the time based on the current hash, or the current block hash. Let me see. Let me open one. So all the holders of this project can download this software and calculate the mutations on their own without depending on my web server, without depending on anything really. So that aids in the desire for decentralization. I'm going to close this because it costs quite some resources. A project that many of you will know that is actually having another approach is Loot. And again, I'm going to just open one of them. We don't have so much time, so I can't really get into the projects themselves individually. So so this is token 442. I'm going to inspect it again. Now, this is interesting. I ask for a URI to a metadata resource file, like a JSON file, but instead I get this gibberish. So it starts with data : application / JSON semicolon Base64 comma, and then I get a whole bunch of gibberish. Now, this is a data URI. So it's not a URI like you're used to, like a URL here with like a domain name, but this is also in most browsers something that's being accepted as a valid URI. So I can copy this whole string and just paste it here. And you should never do this if you get this link from like some hacker or something, because this is also can be risky. But if I open it, you can see that again, it just shows me some JSON file. And JSON is this format to express the properties that an NFT has. So it has a name. Maybe I can make it larger. It has a name, description, blah, 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 until here. And then it has an image. And again, you see this string starts here, data, colon, image. It ends here with a whole bunch of gibberish. If I copy that string, and I have to do it really precise, so include the data part and end before the quote. You see now I have an SVG. So we can also inspect this. See, actually, this is an SVG, a very simple one, because if it would be a very complicated SVG, it would be, again, too complicated to put that on chain. So what happens here? These data URI, it specifies here that it's data, so from there on it knows what to do. It's not HTTP, it's not HTTPS, it's not IPFS. The type of the data that it expects is in this, I think it's a MIME type actually. So it expects, it expects SVG, and that's XML. And the code, this gibberish, is encoded as Base64. And that is a way to express complicated data like images or sound or MP3, or in this case SVG, to express it in characters that will not fuck up data transmission. Because in this gibberish string, you cannot, for example, have a quote, because that would ruin it, or other like non-ASCII characters. And that's basically the trick. So these two steps is, first you encode the entire JSON file in Base64 as a data URI. And then again, in the image attribute, you encode it again. So actually in the end result is that this SVG image has been encoded twice. So you also have to decode it twice. I will go here. So this, there's actually one more way, which is more similar to the first project that I showed on art blocks on my own. Because in those two projects, the art blocks and the Mutant Garden Cedar, the assets referenced were on a web server, on my web server, or in the case of art blocks, on the art blocks web server. There's also one way to store both the metadata and the image, to store that differently on IPFS. So I would say that IPFS is not a blockchain, but it's a distributed file, hosting solution, you could say. So it's already more resilient. If you would take one IPFS node away, the file would still be there. And this particular artwork that I made, you can also on Zora, you can always inspect the contract, and you can inspect the metadata, and it shows, okay, the metadata for this one is stored on IPFS, and the artwork is also on IPFS. So if I click on here, I'll get this here, and I'm inspecting this JSON through a gateway, because my browser doesn't by itself understand what IPFS is. If I would do this IPFS, because this is actually how it's stored in the smart contract, my browser doesn't know what it is. I also have Brave, I believe Brave does understand. There's some browsers who can do it, but until that, you have to use a gateway, and this gateway is provided by Pinata. And you can see that the image also references, again, an IPFS hash, which is this one. So if I'm going to refresh it, you can see that takes quite a long time, because the beauty of IPFS is that it's shared and distributed and safe, but it's also much slower than on a web server. So there's all these trade-offs. I wanted to show that project as well, but we don't have so much time. We only have like 10 more minutes. Yeah, I'm going to show some of the code really quickly of Orb Lite. This is also just available. You can see it on Etherscan. So this token URI method I've been calling a few times, that you have to pass a token ID. This is how I did it. And I can really recommend also, if you like this kind of stuff, to look at the work of Alberto Granzotto. I've actually incorporated and learned a lot from him. I didn't invent any of this. It's I've used a lot. And I can also share these links afterwards in the chat or something. So you can see what what is going on behind the scenes when somebody calls token ID, like OpenSea calls it, or Zora, to show what the artwork is. In this case, these animated squircles, this like crooked circles. It returns a string that is based on, and here I'm just doing really crude string concatenation of chunks. I'm just generating JSON here as string manipulation. And this is ugly code because Solidity is really not meant to do this. And you encounter all these limitations and you have to hack everything around, which is also fun. But it feels a bit like early demo scene where people only had 64 kilobytes to make an animation. And then the beauty of the animation was sometimes not so much in the animation, but in the innovation to get so much stuff into so little memory. And I think that's a bit the case with these on-chain Solidity SVG tokens as well. So here is the encoding. Let's see where encode image. The image is here, and it's the SVG method actually does the rendering. It does the Base64 encoding, and the render function is here. So one funny ugly thing, let's see, because in Solidity, for the programmers among us, you can only have like 16 local variables. So if you need more, you have to split up your method into arbitrary sized subroutines. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So you constantly are confronted with the limitations, but that's also kind of the fun. And the amazing thing is, I think, is that these kind of NFTs are not depending on anything, not a web server, not IPFS. So as long as Ethereum exists, and as long as we have browsers that can display them, this artwork will remain in its animated form, which looks like this. Let's just pick one. And the way that they are being decided on the way they look, the colors they have, the rotation speed, the transparency, is all calculated in the smart contract based on the moment of minting, the seed hash, I think it's called. Let's see if I can show where that is. So there's many uses of this, like random number generators, but actually they are not really random. They are deterministic. So I can be sure that based on the seed or the birth transaction, that they will always show the same thing. And I decided to give all the orbs a temperament or a bias, I call it here. And there's only 4: horny, deep, innocent, and vivid. And these are just returned as strings. For example, here, trait type, temperament, value, get bias string. And these can also be seen here as properties. I can, as example, decode one of them. So again, I go to the contract of this one. Let's say 338 is the token ID. I inspect the smart contract. Then contract, read contract. So these are the methods. I could say render 338. You can see this is just the SVG code as we understand it in just regular code. but to communicate that we needed to be base64 encoded. So this is just, actually it's a public method, but it's actually never called because the token URI method calls that. So I say, give me the encoded metadata of this token, which is actually quite long, you see. So in here encoded is the SVG code to make those colors and those animation. I'm gonna copy it, paste this here. So again, well, we have still a lot of gibberish, but this has become visible now. So name, description, image, and at the end, the attributes like the colors, the temperament, the amount of rings. And I'm going to copy this again until here. And there we have the SVG. And the SVG is actually, well, relatively complicated if in the sense of like, if it can still be encoded. While developing these kind of things, I really recommend before you start getting into the Solidity code, first finish your idea as just as an SVG, just by hand maybe, just in the text editor. Then when you figured out exactly what you want to do, try to program it in JavaScript because JavaScript is much more forgiving. And when you've done that entirely, then port it to Solidity because in Solidity you will encounter many, well, uninspiring problems because it's a very tight, unforgiving language. The tools that I've been using to do that, one is called Hotchain SVG, and I can really recommend it. So for those of you who have ever developed in, for example, React with Webpack and all that, one amazing thing you can do is like when you are coding, the website that you're building refreshes on the fly, so you don't have to refresh or recompile it all the time. And especially for smart contract programming, compiling it and then refreshing it would take a long time. So I've been using Hotchain SVG, so you can type your Solidity code and then each time with each change it reloads. And this is also interesting because sometimes you're coding for a while and then suddenly it just stops because Solidity has all these limitations in the amount of variables you can have or the amount of rendering that you can do at all, because there's still a gas limit. And with this software, you at the most, well, important moment, you just realize, oh, it just stopped working entirely. Because if your smart contract, the rendering of SVG goes over a certain threshold, then it just stops. You don't get an error message, just don't know what happened at all. I will put a link to this also in the notes. That was really short, and I think I've kind of touched everything that I wanted to show. There's one project that I didn't show. I think I should do that because for history, the first project that like I think nobody really argues that that's true. I think everybody agrees that this is the first on-chain generative art piece on the Ethereum blockchain. And so let's inspect how this one stores its data, which is actually quite surprising because like we just said, oh, I have to remember the token ID. Like I just said, the NFTs always have metadata as a JSON file, which points to the asset. Somehow it's forgiven that this one doesn't do that. So instead of outputting metadata, it just outputs the plain immediately the artwork, which is just text. And if I copy this, it is a data URI, but if I just copy this, you can see that this is the artwork, but it doesn't supply other attributes. There's no metadata file, there's no JSON, there's no title, there's no description. It just plainly outputs this. I don't know if OpenSea would accept this for all projects, but this is kind of a seminal artwork, so maybe OpenSea programmed some kind of exception. I don't know, but it's always a pleasure to end with autoglyphs. I think I will give it back to you, Michail. Thank you.
Thank you, Harm. This was, you know, for me, for someone who does not really write any code, it was incredibly insightful, because even I, as an amateur or charlatan, depending on how you define it, I understood so much about how to actually generate such fairly complex works. One question, you know, like this, what's like this skill set that you brought to this? Like, what is your background, maybe also because we have quite a few artists watching, and many of them might not, you know, have a background in coding. So was there something that you did before? You know, are you a developer by trade and then became an artist?
I started programming when I was 11, and
you nerd.
And I studied software engineering, so guilty. Yeah, but I also went to art school. But I must say that like I'm not a hardcore Solidity developer, because I've made some smart contracts and I thought I'm done, this works, and then I had some of my like real Solidity developers like, oh, if you do it like this, you can get hacked or front run or like. So I'm still learning, and I'm approaching it very much from the playful side, but not the. I wouldn't program like a DAO or something like that. I would not have the skill set to do that.
Maybe one last question. Somebody who's been, you know, spending so much time with on-chain art, what do you think is, in this regard, the next step, the future? What is it something? I mean, we also have quite a few experienced developers that also probably in some groups within the Ethereum community. Is there anything that you wish for the future of on-chain art?
Oh, that's a really good question.
By the way, I don't need to have to understand the answer. You know, you can really speak to that audience.
Now, one thing what I would wish in the community is that people have easy resources or easy go-to website where they can inspect how a particular NFT is built and understand how resilient it is, and if it can be rugged, and also see if it's innovative in a technical sense. Because I think many people just put all NFTs on one pile, and some of them, I think, like, it's not strange to, I think to say that in like 5 years, half of the NFTs we have now will not exist anymore, because nobody's paying for the hosting fees or for the seeding the IPFS hashes, and a lot of money is paid for these things. So education would be good there. I don't know if much will change after the merge of Ethereum, if that will change transaction costs, because if it makes it cheaper, then this kind of stuff might be cheaper to develop. But I'm mostly worried about the provenance or the conservationist aspect of the artwork themselves.
Yeah, this was a really interesting answer, and also you just gave a little inspiration for maybe the next hackathon project, because if these tools are missing, then we should find teams to build them for everyone's benefit, because obviously these are tools that should be open source and accessible to all, so we can advance the space together. Harm, thank you so much for taking the time and to lift the veil. So we were able to learn from you, and everyone, please. Harm is actually one of the NFT artists that you can see exhibiting quite a lot around the world. So, and his artworks are really striking in their fidelity once you have them really, really big before your eyes. So please make sure to visit him. Harm, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And have a wonderful day, my friend.
You too. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
All right, friends. We are continuing. We're moving on. No rest for the wicked, as they say. There should be somewhere another slide, but I do not know if you can see it. Who cares? Let's hand it over immediately. So we teamed up for this talk with our dear friends from Water and Music. So if you're interested in anything in relation of the music industry, either Web 2 or Web 3, Water Music is the key resource on the internet for that. And we wanted to look into something that also, Harm already mentioned, the importance of metadata in particular, because you might not consider metadata that important to your music listening experience, but actually it is the decisive factor between who gets paid, who gets attributed, and who might, be able to continue doing these beautiful things. And the panel that we have is a panel of builders, of engineers, of lawyers, and music industry professionals. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to this beautiful group of people, and to Brooke in particular from Water Music, who is going to be hosting that. Have fun, friends.
All right, thanks so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next panel. Yeah, this is great to be here. And I'm joined by a really, really great group. And I'm going to try not to talk too much, but at least that was a nice intro. But yes, hi, I'm Brooke Jackson. I represent Water and Music, which is a music and tech research newsletter and now DAO as of last year. And yeah, we do research on areas where music and tech meet. We attempt to analyze and connect the dots in areas and, demystify some of these places, such as Web3. So a lot of what I'm doing as a researcher and biz ops person at Water Music is looking at music NFTs. And we have a big database that you can find, the paid members of our newsletter and DAO can find at waterandmusic.com. We have a database that tracks as best as possible, which is part of what we're going to be talking about here, what's going on in music NFTs. I've been tracking these for about a year and a half alongside our founder, Sherry Hu, and a lot of collaborators as part of our DAO. And yeah, have stumbled upon the problem of metadata in just trying to analyze what's going on. So we look at primarily primary sales and do analysis of what is happening in the overarching trends of the market. And it's tough. So I'm glad to be talking to people who are behind the scenes, much more, technologically capable than I am, that are actually putting this out there. So I'm going to hand it over. Let's just go around. I'll just start with, I'll start to my right here. So you can tell us a little bit about what project you're involved with, and a little bit what problem you're looking to solve in music with Web3. So Ahmed, I see you first. So why don't you start?
Hey folks, thank you, Brooke. I appreciate the intro. Happy to be here. My name is Ahmed. I am a data engineer by background, but I'm a DJ and producer as well. The project I'm involved in, I'm part of a community called the Underground Violet Rave. So just a group of artists, DJs, graphic artists, all kinds, just creatives who came together for music, honestly. And brought my technical background. I was like, hey, you guys realize we could be doing a lot more stuff if we had metadata. So started digging into that. Did a Zora hackathon project where I looked at the major publication platforms, looked at their metadata standards, and kind of did like a state of metadata, and just started a conversation in our community and on the broader music NFT community, because I believe that standard adoption is important for every single industry. Just go look at ISO standards, for example, if you want a clear example. And I think that particularly with music NFTs, developing a standard and having wide adoption is mutually beneficial for everyone. And it's inevitable, because with the adoption of a standard comes the establishing of secondary microservices, and money talks. So I'm excited to see where the space goes, and I'm incredibly honored to just be a part of the conversation with so many bright individuals.
Great, thanks so much. All right, Kyle number one, Kyle Dillon, why don't you go ahead with our pitch?
Sure thing. Thanks so much. I'm Kyle. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Arpeggi Labs. We started Arpeggi back in October, and we basically created the first fully on-chain music creation platform, similar to the last talk with Harm, actually, but for music. And early on, we kind of started thinking about how do we represent the contributors to a song on the blockchain. And not just how do we, replicate sort of the existing standards that we see with music, things that are stored in, PRO, like that PROs handle and traditional publishing systems, but how do we actually think about new ways to represent contributors to music and store that and build interesting systems on top of that? So things we're really interested in are, we basically developed a on-chain protocol for music creation, as well as a platform you can use called Arpeggio Studio. So artists can make songs in the browser, and all of the components of a song, including the samples that were used in that song, as well as any, any stems that were remixed from another song, all of the components of that song are tracked. And basically, you could build really cool systems on top of this for distributing splits to all the contributors. Artists of songs will be incentivized to allow others to remix their songs permissionlessly. That's sort of one of the theses that we have at Arpeggio. So obviously this touches a lot about metadata, and it's, it's a little bit different than I think the traditional way we think about metadata as just being like, who made the song at what time. Instead, we're thinking about how do we literally change the way that we think about composition and collaboration, essentially, in sort of a day and age where remixing and reuse is so common, and it is kind of the new paradigm for creating. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, over to the other Kyle at LexDAO. Introduce yourself quick.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kyle. I'm one of the core contributors at LexDAO, and LexDAO is the International Legal Engineer Guild. So we're lawyers who code. I'm non-practicing, and whatever I say is not legal advice. So yeah, anyway, what I'm doing is we've got this Web3 Music Coalition, and we offer grants to DAOs, Web3 DAOs, to go to traditional music events like Music Biz Conference, and we're also friends of Music Biz Conference, so opportunities to speak at Music Biz Conference. And then we only started in March, but we'll expand and offer more grants for more opportunities to bridge Web3 music with traditional music. The main thing we're working on right now is, Web3, I guess Music Coalition, it's technically a sub-DAO of Ethereum magicians. So we spend quite a bit of time with them, as well as the cat herders. So very much into EIP. And at the moment, we're building up a group of members for DDEX. And then DDEX is going to have, well, they already have a working group of traditional music industry. And so then we'll have some Web3, and hopefully, well, I don't know what standards they'll come up with. I'm just kind of a liaison, but I assume the standards will bridge between DDEX's kind of one-to-one private database system into Ethereum, so an Oracle type of thing. I saw what Jack did with Web5. That was kind of cool. I don't know how related it'll be to that, but that's pretty much what I'm up to. And oh yeah, my background way when was in enterprise music publishing with what's now Anthem Entertainment. And so I'm personally really interested in the new royalties that are happening in this space. Resale is very exciting, and from my previous experience, we kind of expanded neighboring rights, and that's now quite lucrative, and everyone kind of knows about that these days. And so resales like that, but then who knows what other rights these new markets will produce that will add more diversification of revenue for the artists. And I am also very interested in making sure creators get credits, and that's a harder problem. That's edge computing and all that, but I've got robotics pet project that's ultimately going to come back around for that. But yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Amazing. Thanks, Kyle. And last but not least, AJ.
Hey guys, thanks for having us. So AJ Washington here. I'm the founder of Float DAO. Float is a music curation protocol with a DAO built on top of it. Our mission is to bring the best music on the internet to Web3 and introduce Web3 technology and NFTs to artists as a way for them to make sustainable living and earn a living wage from their work. Our primary goal is to help artists maximize the value of their work and the reach. And I think, when we think about metadata not only, like, Michail suggested at the top, helps in attribution and payment, but also in discovery. And discovery is a very big part of our mission, helping talented artists be seen, be heard. And this discussion is core to that being available to artists. And so we're very interested and invested in helping establish a metadata standard, helping push that, helping alleviate any challenges and roadblocks that may be in the way of that being a realization.
Amazing. All right, let's dig into it. So I said to you guys before we started, I would love to see by the end of this thing, which if we could come to a consensus on, one, what the problems are with metadata as they stand today, what your thoughts are on how we could actually start to solve these problems. And, that could be a big ideal kind of thing, or just literally like, how do we connect stakeholders in this place to you or to leaders that are actually starting to take action on this. So to start with that, let's just hear, where do you guys think the biggest problem is right now as it stands today to getting good, solid metadata standards for NFTs in the music space? And I'll just open it up. You guys, I won't call.
I can start if that's okay. Get us going here. I wrote a couple things down, but I think to keep it relevant, I think the most important thing is education, especially when we start engaging artists and talking to them about like metadata, like, hey, what's metadata used for? Usually it involves artificial intelligence or something like that. It's like, no, man, do you like Spotify and Apple Music? Do you like seeing recommended songs? Are you a DJ who digs for music on Bandcamp or SoundCloud? On Bandcamp, you can go and, hey, show me hip hop from Tokyo, Japan, and it'll give you songs that are hip hop in Tokyo, Japan. And imagine if we had metadata for all of that music, the depth of research we could do on sound selection. That's what was missing for me. That's why I decided to do the project. But what's important about the education piece is, when we look at the major publication platforms who are the faucet into this ecosystem, they're not adopting. They have the metadata standards, but on the user interface side, they're choosing not to allow people to populate that metadata standard. Very valid reason. When you go ask them, it's because it's a barrier of entry for artists. They see that huge metadata standard and they're like, whoa, I don't have like 3/4 of this. I'm not going to upload music. Fair enough. What I'm saying is, if you're an artist and I'm telling you that people are trying to build secondary services to get you paid based off of data that is published, you should start asking those publication platforms why you can't populate that data. And you should be asking for the option to populate that data yourself. And it's going to be an iterative process, and we're all building. So let's build.
Yeah, and I agree. I think really I think education is a barrier, but also, like Muta suggested, it's also how do we allow this to be an easy process for artists, or maybe alleviate the pressure on artists themselves to populate this information, and can we do it in a more decentralized way, right? And that's something that I think is in line with the ethos of Web3. I think there are incentive mechanisms that we could think about that would allow a broader population of folks who support artists, love music, understand the importance of this information being submitted to participate. And I think that's really the area of focus that we're really interested in exploring, is how can we make this a more communal process and create some sort of incentive that allows more people to get involved.
I kind of I was a part of this. I'm still a part of this Telegram chat called Music NFT Metadata Standards, and it's been really interesting to see the conversation in that channel evolve over the past few months. My understanding, based on following that channel, which has a lot of really engaged and interested folks who want to solve this problem, is that there's sort of two questions right now. There's actually two different conversations happening in parallel. One is sort of the traditional metadata conversation, which is really important, and it's kind of what Ahmed and AJ are talking about. How do we get really accurate information about the song or the song specifically, and put that in a way that it can be shared across a bunch of different platforms, and aggregators can display songs using that information. I feel like that is a problem that a lot of people are working on interesting solutions for. Catalog and Mint Songs, I think in partnership with Water and Music, you guys just put out a standard that looks kind of similar to like an ISRC, which is sort of the traditional music industry standard. That's really exciting. There's a project called Noom, which is, I believe, an open source aggregator that's taking music from sound.xyz catalog and basically massaging the data using its own pipeline, and then publishing that to a open source database as well. So that has its own sort of metadata standard there. And all this stuff is really important. However, I think like perhaps a more, I kind of think that eventually though, this question of like, how do we basically take the same standards that exist in Web 2 and apply them in Web 3 will get resolved somehow. Like either one metadata standard will dominate or one aggregator will dominate, most likely. But I think the thing that's really most up in the air and up for debate is the rights side. It's like the legal side of NFT music. I think that's the area that doesn't have an answer right now. And I think it's probably the biggest challenge, the biggest obstacle for traditional artists, especially ones who are signed to record labels, for putting their music on chain. Basically, like, what does it mean if I create an NFT for my song? What are the legal rights associated with that? And how do you codify those rights into that metadata of that NFT? Like, can I make a music NFT that actually has these rights associated with it? For example, fractionalization of royalties. What if I don't want to do that? What if I just want to make a pure collectible? Is there like a standardized way that we can represent that information on chain? And I think that's the area where we can really change music permanently, as opposed to just like, getting the same kind of data that we already have for Web 2 music for Web 3. Now let's actually, I'm curious actually to hear about what Kyle, since you're a lawyer, but I know it's not legal advice. Curious what you think about the rights side of this equation.
Yeah, your assessment is great. The one thing I would add to that, kind of the first track, is tags are really useful. So we've kind of had discussions about what's the core metadata, the absolute required metadata. So as AJ said, right, some people will just kind of not do it if there's too much. So what's absolutely minimum, like who are the creators on it? And that one's really tough too, especially because say some creators left out, or they're inputted incorrectly. So then how is that updated, especially in an immutable chain? So that the immutability issue in that first track, as well as stuff that is metadata that's yet to be developed, because one of the cool things about the NFT space is there's so much creativity happening that just kind of categorizing that sort of secondary metadata as tags can be helpful. So BPM, I know, is kind of sometimes given its own, but perhaps it should be just more out of that tag thing. But in any case, yeah. So, but on the legal side, yeah, that's just a really hard problem. And so one of what we're discussing right now, which I think will be helpful for NFTs generally, is having a legal document standard, just period. So in Lifestyle, we're dealing with real property, not just copyright, lots of different types of associations. But yeah, I guess the legal community really is kind of figuring it out. I personally have a position where the NFT is a sui generis type of property, and it kind of should be kept separate from the other property. And I feel that when that happens, the analysis is a little bit easier to understand, and sort of bundle of properties that where some other people, they'd rather not create a sui generis, and so see if our existing structures work, and so don't have to have a whole almost new area of property law develop. So even at that really low level, those legal questions are yet to be answered. But yeah, one of the things that will be, a catalog is an example of someone that's just kind of doing it on the ground with their splits and having that built in. So splits is a little bit easier than the other ones, because same as resale, it's part of the what's compiled in the EVM. So it's kind of more practical than kind of, where copyright often is statutory. So people have to understand the statute to apply it. And so that's another one of the reasons why I think NFTs should be a little bit separate, because NFTs are almost like returning to natural law, where it's possession is 9/10 of the law, that kind of thing. That doesn't really operate in copyright because it's statutory, but in physical, it really does matter. If I have my laptop physically here, that's, you know, then I'm possessing it or whatever. And so, yeah, so with the public-private key situation and people having control because they have that secret, which is kind of like a trade secret, then it does allow this interesting, I would almost say, tort-like nature for NFTs. But yeah, so anyway, but getting back to metadata more directly, I hopefully will have a metadata standard for legal documentation, and then something that should also be part of that is a UX where signatures are fairly, people understand that they're agreeing to something, that it actually feels like a signature, like in a traditional contract. And for copyright, that's really important. If the asset is transferred, it has to be in writing in quite a few territories. And so kernel communities, they're working on signature economy stuff. So that's one place that tech could happen. I feel like we're all kind of aware of what needs to be done, just have that patience of building it out. But it does seem like the overall narratives are going in the right direction. So I'm optimistic.
Are there any standards, Kyle, since it sounds like you're pretty optimistic about this, as you said, are there any places that you feel like are doing it really well right now that maybe we can get behind? I know it's been mentioned that OpenSea's standard is sort of the standard that everyone's using because they're the biggest, they were kind of first, and maybe that's not perfect for what we're doing with music specific NFTs, but yet we're trying to kind of cram in, you know, a little proverbial square peg round hole kind of thing. Is that the right direction, or is there someone else who's doing it that that, you know, you're looking to, that's like, yeah, we've got the legal stuff doing really well. I mean, you mentioned Catalog is doing it from the ground up, but is there any place where, or maybe addressing the education aspect and getting the right data in to begin with? And then I'll have a follow-up question, but if I wanted to make sure we noted that if there's someone doing it really well, and maybe it's LexDAO.
Oh yeah, I mean, LexDAO started the process for a more general legal solution, but there is a distinction between the legal that is because it's part of a contract in the EVM, and then legal that is more, well, there's that law as code thing, right? And so law as code, when legal can, it's that kind of legal, then there are already solutions there. But for instance, LexDAO has this thing called Kelly Down. It's a legal wrapper, so it's an LLC on top of that, and that is what is it? I think it's called wet code or something like that. There's dry code and wet codes. Wet codes, you know, human brains, and so that still needs to be built out quite a bit. And yeah, LexDAO is working on it. A few other areas, or a few other, I guess we call them legal engineers, are also working on that. But that one's still farther out. So the law that is getting built out, that's already built out to some extent already, is that law that can be encoded and has been encoded. But that's limited. It does also, though, again, open a whole new space of law like resale. So the first sale doctrine doesn't really matter so much because there's resale that's actually in the EVM. So it's there. So again, possession is kind of, it exists. So what are you going to do? Yeah, Zora, I believe, is, it seems like music NFTs, Zora has the potential to be where these API standards, and yeah, I would call them API standards. That's one of the reasons OpenSea is a leader. It's not just it's that people can secondary. So something like Spin App, they can call into OpenSea and grab the data. And so Zora has the potential for music. It seems to be the leader for those. I personally, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So as much as we can bring in DDEX standards, since that's already accepted, do so. And if Apple is in DDEX, Universal, Sony, all that. So if they, there's a possibility they work with Zora and OpenSea and all that to kind of set a platform standard, and that just happens. and that's especially important for things like resale, because these are opt-in, and I really like that EIP, the Ethereum standards, choose generally for opt-in, and DDEX also is deciding to join in on that and opt-in. That means though that what might happen practically is that sort of the big names that are already well established will kind of create enough critical mass that everyone does decide to opt in, and I'm really motivated to make sure that opt-in is as beneficial for the artists as possible, and seeing how performing rights organizations distribute royalties. There's a good chance that we actually will keep artists at the center of attention, and realize that they're the ones that make this stuff and why we're here in the first place. And yeah,
that's great. Thank you so much for that. And I think there's the tech side of things, and then I want to get back to also the education side of things, because I think a few of you have talked a little bit about that. And I think probably the idea of metadata or seeing a big standard is probably, a barrier to entry, a little intimidating. What are you doing in each of your projects, or what have you liked doing? I mean, Ahmed, you said that you dug into a project because you were trying to learn. AJ, I know we talked yesterday about the fact that probably a lot of the problems with metadata are not necessarily like because of blockchain, it's because of human error, right? So there's some education behind that. So how are you approaching with your projects, education, whether that be onboarding or artists that you're working with? And I suppose, Kyle, just understanding like what it means to break up a stem and how that affects future compositions. You can talk a little bit about what education is doing. Yeah, go ahead, Ahmed.
Yeah, I just figured out you could raise your hand. I had to try it out. I think leading through example, we have aggregators. Aggregators are a standard thing at this point, collecting whatever metadata, contract address, if there's any PRO metadata in there, which I think the catalog metadata standard has ISRC, just none of it's populated. So, the aggregator piece isn't a problem. I think the most important thing we can do now is lead by example and show people what we can do with aggregation. Because we can talk all day about, the future microservice ecosystem or whatever, but if there's no data to actually build these products that we're talking about, then it's kind of useless to talk about something that doesn't exist. So, with this small data set that we've been able to get, and, folks like Water and Music like you guys have been able to aggregate over time, I challenge all of our perception about the future of the music ecosystem and how it works. We're moving towards a services-oriented future, and if a platform makes a service that is able to power a powerful secondary music streaming service or music discovery service or music curating service, and people can get paid passively, we don't have to do any convincing. There's not, it's do you want to get paid money? Then adopt the standard, because there's microservices built on this, the same way that Zora operates, right? With the API. The APIs, we're saying we're going to make the data available to you, go build stuff with it, because it's built on Zora. That's good for Zora, that's good for you. And so that's the future we're moving towards. So maybe a little bit of a radical opinion, but I think that with the right players involved, if we keep good hearts and we keep each other honest and we keep doing this in a community-oriented way, all the pieces will fall into place, because money talks at the end of the day.
Yeah, AJ, you're doing a lot. Your whole pitch is about bringing music into Web3. So that's clearly educating artists on that. How are you talking about that, especially in terms of this more technical side of things?
Yeah, I mean, this is metadata is a boring but important topic, right? And it's nothing, we don't say metadata ever to artists. I think like Ahmed saying, we talk in terms of dollars, right? Artists come to us because they want capital and they want distribution, right? And I think it's, both those things are solved by metadata as an underpinning to making the music more valuable, one, right? Because it's more usable, as Ahmed was saying, if you have robust metadata, on a song, the two songs, one has robust metadata set, the other one doesn't. One is discoverable, one's available for use in microservices, one can be monetize in a much greater way, more efficient way than the other, right? And so when we talk to artists, typically we're talking to them about how to maximize the value of their music. And I think this is just a part of the conversation. We need this information so that we can make your music available to all these different places and these different services, so that it can be distributed more broadly. You can get more exposure. That's sort of the language that we use to speak to artists with. And I think ultimately what incents them to think a little bit more clearly and closely about what information they're submitting to us as they're submitting music, and how we can help them, right? And so I think this is an important part of the conversation we have, but it's nuanced in how we have it. We typically will start to see eyes glaze over, even if we talk NFTs and technology too much to artists. And so we typically try to abstract that away and talk in terms that they want to hear and understand. And typically, like I said, it's it comes down to capital, and it comes down to reach and value of the work. And we use that as the leading sort of Trojan horse to have this deeper conversation about, okay, here's how we do those things, is these ways.
That's great. And Kyle, I don't want to skip you if you have any. I know I mentioned just the fact that you're breaking up the actual compositions a little bit, which I'm sure is a totally different conversation about education.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that a little bit too. I think it is a little bit different, I think, than like I said, than the kind of traditional metadata systems that we're used to, but it's something that we think is a potential unlock from Web3. It's kind of built around the ideas around composability and the power of composability. A good example of that is open source software, the open source software movement. So like the analog is that in the software world, people started to publish their code openly and allow other people to use it and build things on top of it. And people did so, and they would build things that were more powerful. They would build libraries, operating systems, browsers, and make that code available for reuse. And eventually, nowadays, developers have access to like this unbelievably powerful ecosystem that's just like of infinite code, essentially, that you can do almost anything you can imagine. You can search for it online and find an open source library that does it. And we kind of think about this and say, can we apply this to music, for music creators? Can we have a world where you listen to any song on Spotify, any song on Audius, any song on YouTube, and you can just click a button that lets you remix that song, and you have the legal rights taken care of, payments, royalties, splits, whatever, taken care of, handled by smart contracts or some other system. And yeah, it sounds like a dream, a faraway dream, but like we've kind of built a mini version of this ecosystem that's on chain and uses smart contracts to handle this attribution and like kind of this permissionless remixing is what we call it. And so that's kind of like the prototype. That's what we've built at Arpeggi and kind of what we're working on expanding and fleshing out. And our thesis is that in the same way that open source software, started off as kind of a radical idea that goes against everything, that capitalism tells you about selling and owning your content. We think that hopefully we can prove that there's actually a model where sharing and collaborating openly with other artists and kind of letting your music free in a sense will actually be beneficial for the artist. It'll make them more well-known, and they can profit from they can earn an income and earn a living through like all kinds of new models that exist, whether selling NFTs, live performances, whatever it might be, while still letting people remix and reuse their stuff. So that's what we built at arpeggi.io. And yeah, I mean, again, it's not exactly related to metadata, but it is this kind of interesting new approach to collaboration and songwriting.
Yeah, and I think that goes over to what Ahmed was saying. It's that you're showing by example. You're showing what you can do with this right now and why it matters, and then people are getting paid clearly too.
Yeah,
which is
that's
great.
very important.
It's great for everyone.
I have a question for Kyle, just on this source music. Is as producer or artist submits track samples to Arpeggi, is there just a terms of use that says this music is freely available to remix, or is there how is that sort of initiated, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a terms of use, and there's a license agreement essentially that people release their music under. Right now, it's simply CC0. which is the most, the most open and free licensing terms that you can have.
Yeah.
In software, that's the equivalent of like the MIT license, essentially, which is basically saying you can use my code for whatever you want.
Got you.
And that's what we're doing right now. But ideally, this model can evolve and we can start to answer some of the trickier questions and supports more complex right systems where people, are expected to profit from any time their music is used, or you have to re-register your songs back in to the system. Or we could use CC BY, which is saying that you have to provide attribution. You don't necessarily have to pay me when you use my stuff, but you at least have to give me attribution. So yeah, there's some options there.
Interesting. Yeah, no, we're thinking a lot about open source music as well, and what an ecosystem could look like where any song that is heard could be not only remixed, but there could be UGC added to it, as a way to really showcase the cultural value of the song or music, right? So think about a song that gets uploaded to Spotify and then remixed on SoundCloud, and then there's a reaction video on YouTube. There's comments, on all these contributions, but they're all separate. What if they all resided in the same place, right? And you really get to measure the cultural impact of an inspiration that's provided by any piece of music. I think it's something that artists would love to see. And if you have to sort of own an NFT to be a part of the discussion by contributing in this way through not only remixing the song, but if you want to create fan art, that's inspired by it, or create a visualizer, that reacts to the music. That could be an interesting way to, again, attribute value back to the artist. You have to own an NFT. The NFT is linked to, it's all linked together in this content web. And I think, and a CCO standard would be a really interesting way to accomplish that. So yeah, I may be following up with you after this.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Float was one of the early supporters of our pudgy, so shout out to AJ and Float.
I'd like to say real quick, I've worked with Creative Commons a bit, and I've tried to get them involved in the NFT as well. And so DDEX has been on board, but Creative Commons so far, they're, I guess, a bit on the sidelines, but hopefully they will have a working group. We had a working group with AI, so I don't think there's any reason why we can't have a working group with NFTs. And I see some issues like Song and Dayman. He's said he doesn't really like CC0 because his identity is really involved in the music. So if someone synchronizes it to, say, like a political campaign ad or something like that, then it's tacitly saying that he agrees with that campaign. So for things like EDM stems, if it's like a drum line that people can't really recognize immediately, that drum or something like that, then it makes a bit more sense to do straight up CC0. But hopefully, yeah, CC will start to get more involved with the NFT community and kind of have more options, so that something like Arpeggio can have it so that sync license has to be something that is negotiated, but everywhere else, like as long as it's on chain and using an on-chain system, then it is CC0. And it's really great for memes. Disaster Girl, she didn't make any money off of that meme, but because it's all public. But then with that NFT that said, well, this is the original, then suddenly she had a private version of it. And so there's this really great paradigm that we can pursue that is taking the best of what copyright provides, but not overly emphasizing the monopoly and kind of abusing monopoly like copyright has done in the past. So yeah, hopefully we can build out with Creative Commons. I'll keep working on that.
This is how we reach the utopia that is promised by Web3, right? Just a few back-end things to do. So I'm getting pinged that we're getting close to the end here. So I don't want to leave without having whomever's watching this not be able to follow up on what you guys are saying. I know we've already got maybe a little follow-up between Kyle and AJ. This is obviously going to be an ongoing problem that we're having to solve. Can you each let us know where people who are watching could connect with you, or what you're doing, especially as it relates to the future of metadata standards? Yeah, and I'll just let you go around. Yeah.
Sure, I'll go first. So yeah, people can follow us on Twitter at Team Float, TEAMPHLOTE. They can also check out the site, float.xyz, phlote.xyz. And yeah, share music with us, earn tokens and be a part of the ecosystem. I would love to hear what you're listening to.
Awesome, thank you.
You guys can follow me on Twitter. I'd love to, help with any projects, make any data sets available, help you re-implement code or anything like that. You can follow me on Twitter at Mutahadir, Mutahadir. And yeah, I'd just be happy to collaborate with anything. Part of a citizen developer group, and so advocacy for coding skills, general Web3 knowledge, any Web2 tech knowledge as well. I'd be happy to help personally. So yeah, feel free to reach out. You will get a response from me.
Amazing, thank you. Kyle?
Arpeggi is our Twitter handle, ARPEGGI. And you can also find me at KSD_ETH on Twitter. That'd probably be the best way to find me. Our website's arpeggi.io. And you can find our Discord information there if you'd like to join our Discord. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Same, thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, so myself, I'm Bestape on Twitter, so BESTAPE. And then the Web3 Music Coalition is Web3 Coalition on Twitter. And LexDAO is Lex_DAO, and DMs are open for all three.
Thanks, Kyle. And I suppose I should mention one more time, I'm with Water and Music. And again, we're doing a lot of research, collaborative research as the DAO on Web3 areas when it comes to music. That can be found at waterandmusic.com. Some of that is free content, some of that is paid membership content, but and you can also follow me at Brooke Jackson at Twitter, JAXON. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciated the conversation, and I'm sure we'll keep it going offline. See you.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for this very, very in-depth and exciting conversation. Who could have thought that metadata could be such an invigorating topic? I cannot wait to have more metadata in my everyday life, which we all have. Ultimately, when you look at it, you are more metadata than you are human these days, which is one of the main reasons why we are engaging in the technologies that we are engaging in every day here in this weird and wonderful Web3 space. And again, if you couldn't write down all the usernames, please go onto my own Twitter profile, opium_hum. And there's a thread where pretty much everyone who was speaking today is linked, so you can follow them for more insights. So friends, we have now the very, very last conversation input of the summit, of this metabolism hackathon that we were putting on since Thursday, or since Wednesday rather, with ETH Global. So full week of learning, building, interacting, making friends, maybe enemies even. But this next speaker most certainly is not going to be your enemy unless you are an immoral, sentient AI, because Imane Bello, who I happen to have met on an event that Zora put on a few weeks ago in Paris at ETHCC, randomly got talking, and her expertise is quite relevant currently, and that is the field of AI ethics. Now, one would say, Michail, why would we talk about ethics in the context of engineering and technology building? But technology is not neutral. Technology is biased, technology is ideological, and technology can have moral and ethical implications. And giving these emergent new AI ecosystems, DALL-E being a really good example, or Pollinations.ai, a project that I really, really like, there's quite a lot to think and speak about. So that's exactly what's going to happen. There might be some Wi-Fi issues because Imane is on the road right now. So I do hope that she has a stable connection to you. If not, we might have to repeat it some other day. But please, I would like to give the stage to you, Imane. Welcome, welcome.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Eat Global, obviously, for organizing such a great event, as well as to Zora for putting all of this together. So as Michail was saying, the discussion today is going to be about AI ethics per se. We will focus on image generation models. And the question is, what lessons could be drawn from AI ethics for the future of the economy, which is, as you know, Web3. So I'm not going to discuss much about Web3 because I don't want to bore you. And I know you know that Web3 has this huge potential. It does represent a paradigm shift. And we've all heard the keywords surrounded around financial inclusion, governance, decentralization. So we all know Web3 does represent this new tool, this potential to use our collective imagination to design new digital spaces on on-chain tools. So how exactly do we build this future together? How exactly do we ensure that the expansion of the Web3 actually serves humanity at large? My key point here is in the title, and it is that AI ethics per se can be a tremendous asset to know what has been done before in the field that also is related to paradigm shifts, that is also related to doing things differently and potentially serving humankind at large. And that as part of its ethical considerations, its consequences, its potential harms on individuals and groups, and that we can just use that in order to gain some time, in order to not repeat the same old mistakes, in order to get ahead, to actually fulfill what we are, I think, all here for, which is the potential of Web3. So very briefly, we say that in AI ethics, there are two types of harms. And just so you know, before I deep dive into it, I will today with you, hopefully, focus on image generation models, notably, as Michail just mentioned, Dolly. Because I think, those models do represent a paradigm shift as well, and they will be used in the Web3 to create images, to create landscapes, to create multimodal user experiences as well. So it's important to understand what they are, what their potential consequences could be, and how exactly we go around them. So AI ethics in general does represent, according to researcher Kate Crawford, two types of harms. Harm A, harms of allocation. Harm B, harms of representation. Harms of allocation are harms where people, affected persons, are not receiving, are not being allocated resources. So here you can think of not getting a loan, applying to get a loan at an institutional bank. See, here we go with financial inclusion, and being rejected based on either a decision that has been made by an AI system or a decision that has been pushed for by an AI system and agreed upon by a human being. Either way, so those are harms of allocations. You are not being allocated a given resource. And then we have harms of representation, which I think here we will also deep dive into because we will discuss image generation models. So we are discussing images, representations of society, structures of power as well. So harms of representation is when a given person or a given group are represented in a given manner. Either they're represented with indignity, or they are being stereotyped upon, etc. So here you can think of, well, we'll discuss harms of representation when we discuss the limitations of some AI models, notably image generation models. So if you haven't heard about them, if you haven't heard about image generation model, I'll give you some examples. So the first well-known image generation model that we know of is called GPT-3. Well, GPT-2, but we'll discuss GPT-3. It's a system that uses language to instruct a large neural network to perform a variety of text generation tasks. So the input is a language, and the output here is also text generation. For DAL-E, we have DAL-E and DAL-E 2, which is the newest version of DAL-E. It's a system that was created by OpenAI, which simply needs a simple text description to generate an image. So here you can think of a chair that looks like an avocado, and then so you input this simple text description to the system, and the output that you have is, well, an image of a chair that looks like an avocado. What the system does, DAL-E 2, it turns those simple text descriptions into, and this is very important, into realistic photos that have never existed before. A raccoon that dunks at basketball. So it turns text into realistic images that have never existed before. It can also realistically edit photos. So if someone wants to take a very important historical building that exists somewhere and very realistically edit the photo and pretend that there is smoke behind this building, it is possible. So take a second to think of the potential consequences of what it could mean, solely in terms of misinformation, for instance, or of representations of reality as well, how people understand information, how people understand realities. So it can turn text into realistic photos, it can realistically edit existing photos, and it can also start with an image and create variations of that image based on the given image. So think here of The Kiss by Klimt. The input here is The Kiss by Gustav Klimt, and the outputs are variations of The Kiss. So not The Kiss, but variations of The Kiss. Same colors, different positions, but when you see it, and if you're interested, you can absolutely take a look at those examples that I'm giving. Those are real examples of photos that are public. You can find them on the OpenAI website. If you simply Google DAL-E 2 OpenAI pictures. And I wish I could have done a PPT, but I'm in vacations and traveling, so I don't have my computer. So I'm just like, this is solely me and my words. But if you want to take a look at the pictures, you absolutely can, and they're very easily found to be found online. So just to sum up, and then we'll deep dive into the limitations and what we can learn from them for the Web3. You have an image generation model that can turn language into a realistic picture that have never existed before, edit realistically existing pictures, and take pictures and just like do variations out of that one given picture. In terms of art, in terms of landscape creation, like for instance for the metaverse, it could have tremendous applications, and we'll discuss the Web3 applications of image generation models. But right here, I do want you to take a second to think of the limitations of those models, because there could be errors in the labeled data. So that is, if within the system, a picture that represents a car has been labeled as a plane, and you ask the system for a plane, it will give you a car. So there can be errors in the label data. There are gaps in its training as well. So it's very important to have in mind that the system is limited. And it's not solely limited in terms of technical limitations, which is what I've just pointed towards. It also has limitations because it has this potential to harm. And I think it's very important to take this into account if we are to actually embrace this paradigm shift that Web3 could be. The potential to harm individuals or affected groups is notably by reinforcing stereotypes, by erasing individuals, by erasing groups, by denigrating them or treating them with indignity. I'll give you some examples. There are plenty, but I do wish to discuss with you if we have like 5 minutes at the end of this discussion. So I'll give you some examples of assumptions that are reproduced by the system. It does overrepresent generations of people that are female passing for some job occupation, or male passing also for other job occupations. So if you do ask the system to represent a builder, you will have images of male passing persons. If you ask the system to represent a flight attendant, you will have images of female passing persons. So there's this. There's also what I mentioned before in terms of erasure of certain groups or of certain individuals, because the system does overrepresents as well persons with lighter skin tone, or due to its potential to harm, notably by generating what we call legally explicit content. Some images are not cannot be reproduced. So certain experiences, for instance, if you're sick, if you've been in the hospital, if you're a person with disabilities, some experiences have a less chance of being represented. So those are just examples of limitations of this particular image generation system. When we take into account the added capabilities of that system, which I mentioned before, so which are variations, you know, the kiss of Klimt, and then you can do dozens of variations of the kiss. So when you take into account variations, and when you also take into account what is called in painting, so you know, taking a picture and then adding something realistically to it, or just editing it, but very realistically. You also have other pathways, other possibilities to harm, to reproduce, bias, stereotypes at scale. So here, the questions are always, okay, what is the model? What does it do? How do we wish to deploy it? Because OpenAI has really thought ahead how exactly they could deploy DALL-E, and they did not release it for the world to use. How do we wish to deploy it? And which harms are there? Which can be avoided? Which cannot? Which harms do we measure? And those that cannot be avoided, how do we mitigate them? how do we minimize the risk? So taking all of those limitations into account, taking this potential harm into account, I think it's best to have in mind that by taking some tools that exist, and I can create a lot as well, obviously, that's not the point. It's also best to have their limitations in mind. What it means for the Web3 is that, you know, we could think of using image generation models for NFT creations, for profile pictures, avatars, or even, and that's what I mentioned earlier, for, you know, creating land, creating environments, entire environments, notably in the metaverse. So we could create landscapes based on landscapes images that exist, or ask for landscapes that have never been existent before to be created via such systems. So it has this potential to be used to generate not only images, but also entire multimodal experience or worlds. So based on the limitations that we have seen, or in general, I would say, when wanting to align what's work with the paradigm shift that does represent Web3, plus wanting to use this this potential for creativity that also does represent image generation models, it's also important to have those limitations in mind in order to do things differently, and in order to actually align the promise of Web3 with what we actually do. So one key example that I could just like throw up in the air, obviously, I do not have solutions. I only have questions that one can have in mind for all stages of creating and design new places, whether it's at the stage of ideation, or at the stage of team formation, or whether it's at the stage of pitching and thinking the project. What does the project do? To whom? How do we deploy it? Etc. etc. So I leave you with this examples that I really like of publication methods in AI ethics research. A few years ago, there was absolutely no requirements as to how exactly ethical considerations could be taken into account by researchers. And I think there was a momentum 4 years ago. And as of now, the major ML, machine learning, deep learning conferences, research conferences, do ask their participants if they wish to be published, to take into account not only the ethical considerations of the project, but also analyze their potential unintended consequences, and suggest as well risk mitigation strategies. So a first step to do things differently could be, whenever you use the tools that we have to create new ones, to think ahead of the potential harm that the project per se could embed. So my point here, and I would be happy to take any questions because there's a lot to deep dive into at many stages. My point here is that it's great, obviously, to have in mind the capabilities of the model, and those should be taken into account. But it's best to also take into account the larger context in which these images can be used or shared, and to do this, you know, in the present times and also in the future, because it needs to be a flexible approach. I told you at the very beginning that image generation models could be used to create worlds, and as of now, we don't know for sure how exactly what exactly the consequences will be. So based on this recognition, you know, this humility of we don't know exactly what all the consequences are going to be, but based on the knowledge that some consequences are known, some consequences have been attached to existing systems, to existing technologies. There are fields out there that are specialized into, you know, centering lived experiences of affected communities to actually imagine globally a future that works for everyone. So yes, I will leave you with this. I will leave you with the possibility to imagine further, and based on a given understanding of how social hierarchies work, based on an understanding of how the relationship between language and power works, and just with this, you know, with this plea that there's so many people out there that would be thrilled to work with you, so that you can also interrogate your work and enrich it with ways to render it less harmful, to whom, in what ways, you know, and just do it, you know, do it better. Voila. That's what I can give you. That's obviously a very brief introduction on image generation models, on, you know, the types of harm that we have highlighted when it comes to AI ethics. And then, you know, I'm also very eager to learn about your projects and see what we can do, you know, in the Web3. That's a very bright future we could build together. Voilà. If you have any questions, I would be happy to take them. I'm unsure how you can ask them, but I would be here for it.
Thank you so much, Imana. I think I will, you know, like, we'll step in terms of questions. We have to wrap it up, unfortunately, very soon. But nonetheless, I do think that this will spark a couple of follow-up conversations, in particular with artists. Also, I do think that we might want to workshop this in a different forum, because I find this conversation and its implications for complex technological systems, or, as I was earlier, when maybe you have not been tuning in yet, been describing, you know, Web3 as a techno-social space, because it never can, you know, the technology can never live outside, you know, its social context, and certain things are just impossible to achieve certain neutralities of technology. You know, there's a couple of conversations in Web3 about, you know, credible neutrality. What does that look like? Is that even possible from a ethics point of view, from a legal point of view? So there is quite a few questions that need to be addressed and don't get addressed enough, in my opinion, in Web3 in particular. But I'm wondering, you've been talking about guiding principles, and since we do have quite a few builders here that, you know, try to build projects that they want to be equitable, you know, that want to be driven by agency, you know, but very often, you know, certain experiences and knowledges, or, you know, ideas are missing in the process. You know, you can't build anything you can't build taking something into account that you don't know of. What would be like your AI ethics quick guide to building with accountability, with ethical accountability? Like, are there any pointers? And even if it's a book that you would say that like is incredibly insightful when it comes to these things.
Okay. I would say at the stage of ideation and team formation, it can be very insightful to look for other skills than solely tech related skills, and look for ethical, philosophical experts. I would also say that it's very difficult to know what one cannot know. So as well, I would, interrogate the technology per se and try to see exactly what the consequences could be. And then to give an idea of, one resource that I find very useful to get started into AI ethics, I feel like the podcast called Radical AI is a very good place to start. Yes, I think it's a good place to start. Radical AI podcast.
Okay, most certainly will put that onto my pile of things I want to know. I mean, there's also, like we could get into very, very in-depth conversations also about ideas of ethics. There's of course like schools of philosophy. What does like an ethic look like that is rooted in like cosmological principles of knowledge formation? You could get very, very deep. Unfortunately, we do not have the time for this. But Imane Bello, please follow her on Twitter. As I understand, you just started your Web3 journey more or less currently. Yes. So I know we will see much more of you in our space. This was just an intro to this weird and wonderful world that is our community around the Global and Zora. And I can't wait to have another in-depth conversation with you.
Yes, well, thank you.
Enjoy your trip, your holiday. Yes. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. See you soon. Take care.
See you soon. Bye-bye. So friends, I clicked again on the wrong thing here. I think I had something to share. Yes, no, this I wanted to share. Yes, that's it. We've done. This is the ETH Global and Zora Metabolism Hackathon Digital Summit Day 2. I do hope it was insightful for you. If you missed any of the content, it is already online, so you can watch all the panels beginning from Thursday's in-depth hackathon workshops and technical guides to the artist workshops with some of the incredible artists. Like AI art with Portrait XO is incredibly fascinating, or blockchain as a technology to solve the refugee crisis by Leona from African NFT community. There's quite a few things that you can explore. And tomorrow we will have the grand finale, the ceremony in which we will give out the prizes to some of you from over 100 or just about 100 submissions that we have received. I only saw a fraction of them, and a lot of them absolutely blow my mind. So thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you soon, either in the Zora sphere or on Twitter or somewhere else in what is our little version of or corner of the Web3 world. All righty, peace out. I'm gonna go offline now, okay?